Starting animating without a proper plan is like building a house without putting the foundations in. In this episode, we talk about the best practices to get you started.
TipTut.
Hello everybody and welcome back to TipTut and welcome to Intro to Adobe Animate 2021. This series will break down step by step how to make an animation in Adobe Animate. At the end of this series you'll have your own animation complete and be equipped to handle all the basic aspects, tools and features of Adobe Animate. I recommend you have a drawing tablet to follow along with this series, and I've recommended a few good beginner options in the description. Without any further ado, let's get right to it. Part 0. Planning and generating ideas. This is called Part 0 because it takes place before you even open up Adobe Animate. Sure, you could just boot up the software, jump right in and have a scribble, but honestly, you'll lose focus, you'll get stuck, and you'll quit. I see this happen all the time. The solution? Have a plan. Step 1 is deciding what you want to animate and in what style. Usually, I've got a few ideas bouncing around my head. If you don't, try to generate some by using things like personal anecdotes that made you laugh. Maybe you saw an interesting character on the street and you wondered what their life was like. Maybe your pet did something silly and you want to make an animated version of it. If you're struggling to come up with an idea, you could start with an idea generator, such as this one by Bardot Brush, to spark your imagination. Once I come up with an idea, I'd like to decide what style would suit it best visually. To do this, I like to use a tool called PureRef, which is a very simple moodboarding and reference tool, but you can use whatever you like. You can drag images and clipboard content onto a simple background to collect your ideas. Start by going to your favourite animation site and start collecting images of things that inspire you. I use my Instagram feed, Newgrounds, YouTube and Giphy. Usually, something will inspire me because I like its colour or its line work. Maybe it has a good story or visual style. For now, I'm just dumping ideas of things that I think are cool into a big repository in PureRef. Now, let's move on to making a storyboard. Usually, I sketch digitally on my iPad, but just to prove to you that this isn't necessary, I've done my sketching this time on paper. Let's draw my idea of a character bouncing uncontrollably along a path with shocked passers-by in the background. When sketching your storyboard, try to think of it like a comic strip. Comics are really great at telling the whole story in the least amount of frames possible. This will ensure that you get your point across in a dynamic and interesting way. Sometimes, if I think I'll have trouble drawing something specifically, I'll sketch it out by itself too, outside of the storyboard. Usually this is for things like characters or complex items that need to be seen from many different angles. I like to take it one step further and ink or colour my storyboards just to get a sense of the finished thing, but you absolutely don't have to. Once you've got your storyboard all sketched out, you're ready to move on to the real beginning, Adobe Animate, the absolute basics. So that's it for episode 0. Make sure you're subscribed and you've rung the notification bell so that you'll be first in line when the next video is out. If you've enjoyed this and my other tutorials, please consider clicking the join button below to become a part of the TipTut zone. Thank you very much everyone, and I'll see you next time on TipTut. I'd like to say a massive thank you to my level 2 and above members: Unknown Ghosts, WN62, Anonymous, Mel M. Hoover, Maybe Sharma, Ralika M, Month336, Ian Costello, Dushyant Sinj, and Davinch Goel. Also, congratulations to Unknown Ghosts, WN62, and Anonymous for being members for 3 months. You lovely people. If you'd like to get exclusive perks such as shoutouts at the end of videos, personal design feedback, discounts on merchandise, and access to the Discord, then consider clicking that join button below.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.
Welcome to Intro to Adobe Animate 2021. Let's pick up our pens and get to animating.
TipTut.
Hello everybody and welcome back to TipTut and welcome to Intro to Adobe Animate 2021. This series will break down step by step how to make an animation in Adobe Animate. At the end of this series you'll have your own animation complete and be equipped to handle all the basic aspects, tools and features of Adobe Animate. I recommend you have a drawing tablet to follow along with this series, and I've recommended a few good beginner options in the description. Without any further ado, let's get right to it. Part 1. The absolute basics. So, what even is Adobe Animate? Well, it started its life back in the day as Macromedia Flash before it was bought by Adobe and eventually rebranded to Adobe Animate. It's used for making animations, interactive web content using ActionScript before and HTML5 now, and Flash games. In this series, we'll go over the animation side of Adobe Animate because frankly, I'm an animator, not a game or web developer. If you want to follow along specifically and replicate the animation I made for this tutorial, you can download some sample files from my website, tiptut.xyz, to get you started. But these techniques can be applied to your own similar animations, and I encourage you to make something of your own because trust me, you'll love it much, much more. Okay, let's get on to using the interface and the absolute basics. Okay, so here we are inside of Adobe Animate and I've got our sample project open here. As you can see, or hopefully you will be able to see soon, it's not actually that complicated. There's only a few layers, a few tweens, and a few frame-by-frame bits of animation in here. So what I'm going to do today is take you through the interface, and we're going to start our animation by drawing the bouncing ball body of our character here. And then in the next episodes, I'll take you through piece by piece the techniques I use to create this. I'll show you a technique in an isolated, simple environment, and then I'll show you how I applied that technique to this particular animation. Hopefully that way you'll be able to learn how to do your own animations as well as recreate this one if that's what you want to do. Okay, so I'm just going to close this project down, and yes, I'll obviously save the changes to it. And when you first open up Animate, you'll be confronted with this kind of window here. Okay, now for animation, you just want to click Create New. That's going to open up a window with all the document settings that you need. Might take a second. By default, it's on character animation, which is what you want to leave it on. You can see you have all these different tabs based on the things you want to make. I'm going to make mine a square, so it's going to be 1080 by 1080. I'm going to leave the frame rate at 24 frames per second because that's kind of the default for animation. Platform type is going to be ActionScript 3 because we're not making a HTML5 canvas, and ActionScript 3 allows you to have all of the filters and settings you might need for animation. So let's click Create and it will open up a new document for us. Okay, so here we have our interface. This large white section in the middle is our stage. This is where all the action in our animation is going to take place. If you want to change any of the settings, you can just right click, choose Document, and that will change any of the settings you made when you first started, just in case you did it wrong, including the background stage color if you find white too distracting. Holding space will allow you to pan by clicking all the way around your stage. You have some other controls up here as well, which allow you to zoom, fit to window, show frame, which fits to window but then allows you to pan around. Okay. You also have the center stage button, the rotation tool, allowing you to rotate your canvas, and your clip content. So turning this on or off will hide any content outside of your frame. Okay. On the left here, you have your toolbar with simple things like selection and free transform tools. So the selection tool will move anything that you draw. For example, if I draw an oval, I can select the oval and move it around. The free transform tool will allow me to scale and squish that oval to my heart's content. The lasso tool will allow me to select portions of it in order to delete them or whatever. The puppet pin tool, the asset warp tool, we'll go into a little bit later maybe, but essentially what it does is allow you to select an item, place pins in that item, and then warp that item using those pins. Okay, so if I were to place a few of these, I can then squash and stretch that item to my heart's content. A little bit complicated, that one, but we might go into it later. Then you have your various types of brushes. You have your fluid brush tool, which is the new updated brush with lots of property settings over here. We'll get to that in a minute. You have your basic brush tool, which is kind of the classic brush within Adobe Animate. So you can see there's not much difference on their basic level, apart from some nice, neat tapering effects and things like that. Pencil tool does the same thing, apart from it draws with an actual line. And then you have your various shape tools, squares, circles, polygons, etc. Then you have your line tool, which draws straight lines. Just skipping through these because they're kind of obvious, right? Text tool will allow you to type. The eraser tool will allow you to erase, believe it or not. The paint bucket tool will allow you to fill an area. So if you press the paint bucket tool there, you can fill in an area completely. The eyedropper tool will allow you to pick a specific color from your stage, and that will turn your brush to that color. Then you have the camera tool, the rotation tool, and the zoom tool, which we will get onto in a lot more detail later on. Just going to select all of that and delete it. If you don't see any of these tools, you can click the 3 dots down here, and that's going to open up your extra tool options, and you can click and drag those tools onto your toolbar like so. Okay. So over here in the properties panel, it will show whatever properties you have for the particular tool that you've got selected. For example, you can paint normal or paint behind the lines you've already drawn with the brush. Paint any sections you have selected, but don't paint anything else, all that sort of thing. You can change size, minimum size, smoothing of your brush, etc. Okay, all these things we're going to get into in detail, obviously, as we use them. I'm not going to bore you by sitting here and explaining all of these details now. But suffice to say that obviously, depending on the tool you select, it's going to bring up different options for you. It's important to note, however, that there are several tabs. Okay, so if I draw something on the stage using my mouse and I select it, I can go to the Object tab, which controls things that are on the stage. This is interesting. I have with my brush tool, I've obviously had object mode turned on there, which means that when I draw something, it turns it into like an unmanipulatable object. If you have that turned off when you draw, it will turn it into a editable, selectable brush selection. But we'll get into that. For example, so if I draw something on the stage, my object menu comes up. I can also select the frame menu, which is to do with the timeline, which we'll get to in a second, or I can select the document properties. So this is basically where you'll spend most of your time when you want to manipulate stuff inside Adobe Animate. Okay. As well as the properties panel, you have your library panel. Okay. And your library is where everything, all assets related to your animation are stored. For example, if I go to my Windows Explorer here, I have this sketch that I've created in the previous episode, which if you haven't watched was just about creating up ideas and coming up with ideas. If I drag and drop that into my library, you'll notice that it appears inside the library. I can then drag and drop that from the library onto my stage as many times as I want. And any changes I make to this item in here will update and reflect whenever we place it on the stage. So I can just delete those. So we're going to use this as an example to explore the timeline. For example, if I drag this onto my stage here, and go back to my properties panel, you'll notice that I can, using my align window, align this to the center of the stage. Pressing Q to bring up my free transform tool, I can drag and stretch it until it fills my canvas and it will snap to the edges of my canvas there. You'll also notice that when I dragged it into my stage, my timeline changed a little bit. And I'll just do it again to show you. If you watch this dot down here, it's gone from an empty gray to a filled in gray with a black dot. Now, those are the two frames styles that you're going to see most often. Empty gray means nothing is in that frame. Dark gray with a dot or dark gray means there's something in that frame. Now, this down here is the timeline, and this timeline basically shows your animation. Okay, you'll notice all of these different colored gray boxes here. But essentially, you can add in several layers, so you can work on different layers in your animation. So, for example, I could rename this one Sketch. Okay, and on the top of this, I could rename this one Rough. And on top of this, I could rename this one Clean. Okay, and now I have a layer for drawing all of my rough drawings, and I have a layer for drawing all of my clean drawings. Now, the way you work in Adobe Animate is there are two types of frame. There is a frame and there is a keyframe. Now, a keyframe is anytime your drawing changes, no matter how you manipulate it, you will need a keyframe to tell it what the new drawing will look like. Okay, and a keyframe has this black dot in it. If I press F5, if I just select a bunch of frames and press F5, that's going to insert new frames. You can also right click and choose insert frame. You'll notice these frames do not have dots in it. And what this means is as we go through our timeline, the shortcut for which is just pressing enter to play, you'll notice that there is no animation going on at all. Okay. If I just choose a frame at random and I press F6 or right click and insert keyframe, okay, I can move or animate or redraw something. And as soon as our animation hits that point in the timeline, it's going to animate that. Those are the two types of frames that you use in Adobe Animate to animate. Okay, so I'm going to clear that keyframe, which gets rid of it there. And what I'm going to do is just on my roughs layer, I'm going to draw or animate what I think this bouncing body is going to look like. And we're going to start off really simple by just doing a circle. Okay. So I'll explain a little bit more about this in the next episode, but if you select your background image here and go to your library, You can press F8 with the image selected and that will turn it into a symbol. And I'm just going to call this sketch. Now don't worry, episode 2 deals with symbols in complete detail. But what this allows us to do under our properties panel is change the color effects on this symbol to alpha. And that allows us to drop the opacity of it so it's not quite so distracting when we're drawing on top of it. I'm going to lock the background layer by clicking lock here. And on our roughs layer on the first frame, I'm going to get out my pen tablet here. And I'm going to press B to bring up my brush tool. And I'm just going to start drawing, okay? So I want to make sure that my brush is the right size. So at the moment, it's a little bit thick. So I'm going to go over to my properties panel here, and I'm just going to change the size down to about 10. And you'll notice that it changes the minimum size. And that basically means that if you've got pressure sensitivity, what's the thinnest line it's allowed to make, okay? So Control Z will undo, which is going to be really useful for you. And you can zoom in, like I said, and pan around as well. So I'm just going to draw a rough circle that's been squashed on the ground. Like so. Okay. Now, we are going to draw this body as if it was just a circle bouncing up and down. So I'm going to move over a couple of frames, and the shortcut for this is comma and full stop. So full stop moves you forward, comma moves you back. Okay. There's a technique called animating on twos, which means that you animate every other frame. So 1, 3, 5, 7, etc. Again, we'll get more into that in the frame by frame details, but I just wanted you to draw something in your first episode. I'm going to press F7 rather than F6 for insert new blank keyframe, which inserts a keyframe, but doesn't put any content on it. Okay. Now I'm going to draw my circle in a slightly different shape, but you might notice it's kind of hard to see what the previous thing looked like. So I can go down to my timeline options here, and I can turn on onion skinning, which shows the previous frame. Okay. Now I'm going to go and draw this ball at its highest point, maybe something like this. Okay. And I like that, but it's not quite center. So I'm just going to move it with the directional pad. Now we have 2 frames of our ball animating. Okay. So I've drawn it at its lowest point, which I think I'm just going to use the free transform tool here to just squish and stretch it out a little bit, because as it's hit the floor, it's probably going to in shape. Yeah. Now I've got these 2 keys. I'm going to go into the middle, and I'm going to press F5 twice to move that other keyframe along. Then I'm going to press F7 to insert a blank keyframe in the middle. And you'll notice now I have a red shape and a green shape. The red shape shows the previous frame and the green shape shows the next frame. In the middle of that, I'm just going to draw the ball in the exact middle. Okay. And I've squashed and stretched it a little bit because as, sorry, my phone there, because as it's falling out of the sky, it's going to stretch and deform itself, okay? And that's going to happen right in the middle of our animation here. So now we have 3 frames, and we can see we can move between them, okay? But this moves quite fast, okay? And what we want this to do is to ease a little bit more. So I'm going to add in some more frames with F5. I'm going to press F7 on this side, and I'm going to do the same thing over here to give us 2 blank frames between our other frames. And I'm going to do something called easing. So what that's going to do is draw this frame here more towards the red shape than the green shape. So at this point it's hit the floor, but it hasn't like started squishing yet. Okay. I just realized I'm doing this backwards. So let's, this is it rising up instead. That's fine. So now it's starting to come out, and here it's going to start to slow down as it reaches the top of its arc. Okay. So now let's take a look at that. I'm just going to select these frames here and just click remove. Okay, so now we have our ball moving up, but that looks a bit silly. So let's select all of these keyframes, right click, choose reverse frames. Okay, if we then remove the extra, we've now got our ball falling rather than flying upwards. As our ball falls out of the air, it hits the floor, it squishes. Let's add in another keyframe so it can settle a bit. And these are just my roughs, so I'm not worried too much. So I can just, press E for eraser and clean it up a little bit. Now we've got our ball falling and squishing. So let's add in one more where it starts to rocket back up into the sky. Like so. And let's add another where it's starting to resettle. And to make sure that it'll be a perfect loop, we can grab this first frame. Holding Alt, I can click and drag it over here. And I'll just add in an extra frame here. Which means that in this frame here now, we've got the first frame again at the end of our animation. So if I add in some more frames with F5, hit F7 to give us a blank keyframe, I can start to do the final bit of easing, like so. Let's go back to showing the entire animation. And there we have our bouncing ball, okay? So I want to see this in action over and over again to see if I like what it's doing. So I'm going to come down here to my looping options and just turn that on. That's going to give us this little blue bar, which if I drag out, will allow me to loop the entire animation. It looks pretty good, but obviously it's hanging in the air for too long because we added that last duplicate frame. So I'm just going to remove those. And now we have our perfect bouncing ball animation. So there you have it. There's a quick, very brief intro to Adobe Animate's interface. Next time, we're going to go into proper frame-by-frame animation. I'll explain what I did here in detail and we'll apply it to our character. We'll give him a head and some arms and stuff like that. Okay, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. Do make sure you've turned on the notification bell so that you can stick around for the next episode and get notified for when it is uploaded. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I'll see you next time on TipTut.
I'd like to say a massive thank you to my level 2 and above members: Unknown Ghosts, WN62, Anonymous, Mel M. Hoover, Maybe Sharma, Ralika M, Month336, Ian Costello, Dushyant Sinj, and Davinch Goel. Also, congratulations to Unknown Ghosts, WN62, and Anonymous for being members for 3 months. You lovely people. If you'd like to get exclusive perks such as shoutouts at the end of videos, personal design feedback, discounts on merchandise, and access to the Discord, then consider clicking that join button below.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.
Let's get started with frame-by-frame animation in Adobe Animate 2021.
TipTut.
Hello everybody and welcome back to TipTut and welcome back to Intro to Adobe Animate 2021. In this episode, I'll take you through the basics of frame-by-frame animation. We'll learn the theory behind it using some exercises and then apply it to our example. So let's get right to it. Part 2, frame-by-frame animation. Animating frame by frame simply means drawing one picture, then a slightly different picture, and so on until we get an animation. You probably did this in the corner of your school books as a child, or on a stack of post-it notes to make a flipbook animation. The essentials basically boil down to two things: timing and spacing. The timing of a frame-by-frame animation comes down to your frame rate. I won't go into details, but the standard frame rate for animation is 24 frames per second. Animators usually make a new drawing every 2 frames, which is called animating on 2s for most movements. But if something is moving very quickly or you need a lot of detail, you place a new drawing every single frame, which is called animating on 1s. Using both of these timings correctly makes for a smooth animation. Spacing involves how you move your objects through that time. For example, if we move this ball in equal increments of space through, say, 13 frames, we get a very linear movement, with the ball moving quite unnaturally. If, however, we make the ball move slowly at the start and end, but faster in our middle frames, we get a much more natural looking movement. You'll also notice that I've squashed and stretched the ball as it moves. This is one of the core principles of animation, which were defined largely by Disney in the 1930s. If you want to make a convincing motion, I highly recommend researching the phrase, the 12 principles of animation. One day perhaps I'll make a series on this, but for now, Alan Becker has a great series that explains them perfectly. Feel free to experiment with making a ball move freely around your stage. Practice and see what feels natural. You can use guides like these to mark out your work. Draw a path for the ball to follow, and marks along that path for where it sits on each frame. Think about what would happen when that ball meets a curve or a hard corner. Okay, let's apply this theory to our animation with our bouncing character in a little bit more detail. Okay, so last episode we animated this very quick and rough bouncing ball just so that you drew something in the first episode. We're actually going to delete this and do a better bouncing ball using the guidelines that we have discussed in this episode. So I'm going to select my layer here and just press the delete icon to add the delete that layer. I'm going to add a new layer in on top, and I'm just going to call this guide. Okay, and rather than making it black, which is kind of hard to see, I'm going to make it like a nice bright orange. And with this, I'm just going to mark where I think the bottom point of our little animation sequence is going to be. And then I'm going to draw up to where I think the top of our little animation sequence should be, like so. So now I've got the highest point and the lowest point, okay? Now, using the same guide technique as before, there's definitely got to be a bit that's right in the middle, but as a ball bounces up and down, it's going to speed up as it falls. It's going to spend a few frames on the floor, and at the apex of its arc, it's going to hover for a few frames as well. So I'm going to put a couple of frames here. So that's going to be one on the way up and one on the way down using the same spacing. There's going to be one in the middle like this. There's going to be one as it's stretching to hit the floor, another as it hits the floor, and then there'd be a second one as well. So there'd be one on the way down and one on the way up here. So this would technically be 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Then that would be on the way, let's do that on the way down. So I'll just stick those on the other side just to make it very clear. Okay. Then we're going to have frame 11, frame 13, frame 15, frame 17, and frame 19. So we're going to go 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19. Okay, and I'm just going to use this as a guide. So I'm just going to lock that layer. I'm going to turn it to outlines by clicking the little outline icon there, which allows me to see beneath it. Then I'm going to add a new layer underneath that and just call it rough. In fact, I'll call it rough body because we're going to separate out all the elements of our character here. So then I'm just going to give myself a whole bunch of keyframes. Specifically, I'll give myself 20 because we've got 19 frames. Then I'm going to select all of the frames on our rough body layer, right click and choose convert to frame by frame animation, keyframe every other frame. And that will give us our keyframes on 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and so on. So now we're ready to go and animate. And what we're going to do here is animate straight ahead because this is quite simple, okay? Animating straight ahead just means literally that. You're going to go from frame 1 through to frame 19 and animate. When it comes to adding the heads and the legs, we may do pose to pose animation, which is where you pick the key poses and then animate the in-betweens later. I'm going to go with my brush tool, which is B. I'm just going to go to a nice solid black line. That's a little bit thick. So I'm just going to take the size and I'm going to drop that down to about an 8. Yeah, that looks much better. So I'm going to zoom in now. I can do this by pinching with my tablet. If you don't, you can press Control, plus and minus. Okay, and we're going to go to frame 1. But first, I'm just going to take a circle that is roughly the size of our character's body using our sketch. And I'm going to position the center of it with our first mark at the very center of that circle. Now I could, if I wanted to, copy this and paste it onto the next frame, but instead I'm just going to go to frame 3. I can't see anything because my onion skin is turned off, so I'm just going to turn that onion skin back on. And I'm just going to draw it with the center now on frame 3 in this position that we've earmarked for frame 3. It's moving quite slowly, so I'm not going to give it too much squash and stretch at the moment. It's going to stay roughly the same shape. And these are only our rough layers. We're going to draw the final neat line on top of that at the end of this tutorial. So at frame 5, we can see that frame 5 is down here in the middle of our ring. So at this point, it's probably, if we had our ball moving, it's probably going to be stretching as he falls down to the ground at this point. So just for clarity, I'm going to copy this shape so that I know I'm working with the same mass. Okay. Then I'm going to move it to the space I want to be. Then I'm going to press Q to bring up my free transform tools. And I'm going to squash and stretch him. Some people might consider this cheating, but it's only for the roughs, so you're never going to see it in the final thing anyway. Frame 7 then, I am just going to copy and paste this layer, but first of all, I will select this and just press delete to get rid of it. So I'm going to Control C, and then Control Shift V will paste it in place on our next frame, allowing me to just move it down like so. And I'm going to do something called point of contact, which means I'm going to make it hit the floor, like so. So now we've got our ball falling down, and it hasn't lost any mass at all. Okay, on the next frame, it's hit the earth, so it's going to splurge out into the other direction. You could just copy this shape, hit Q, and rotate it if you wanted to. But for this one, I am going to redraw it just so that I don't get into that bad habit. Well, the center of our shape should be here on the keyframe. Our previous frame, the center of the ball is missing. So we should have done something like that, as if his body was turning as it hit the floor, but it doesn't matter too much for this simple animation. For this one, we're going to do the same thing, but his body is going to be squashed out onto the floor. Okay, so he's hit the floor like so. The next frame, that's frame 9 then, which we've just done there, as you can see. The next frame is frame 11. And we've earmarked that he stays in this position for 2 frames. So what I'm going to do is just push it just a little bit further. Okay, I'm not too happy with that. So I'll just select it and delete it. And I might rotate my canvas with R or Shift H, I think is the default. Just because I'm left-handed, drawing on a slant like this is a little bit easier for me. Okay, click that button at the top to recenter back up my frame. That's our frame 11. Frame 13 is when it's going to start reaching back out into the sky, and we want that to be quite explosive. So I'm going to go from this relatively flat and squish shape back to something more similar to our previous frame. Okay, so boing, boing, nice. It's looking pretty good. Moving on to frame 15 here. Okay, I'm just going to redraw. And I know that sometimes I've used the center point of these balls to line up with the mark. Sometimes I'm offsetting them. Sometimes I'm not using the guide. But that's exactly all that it is. It is just a guide. You don't have to follow it if you notice something that looks a little bit better. And what I'm doing in my head sort of automatically is kind of tweaking this as I go. I might rotate that around because the mass I feel would be more towards the top of the ball. So I'm just going to hold control and drag out these individual points as well to kind of round out that circle. Come up to frame 17, and then frame 19 is actually going to be like the same as frame 1. So I'm actually going to go to frame 1, copy it, paste it in place there, just so that I've now got the before and after on my onion skin. Okay, then I'm going to do my frame 17, and again I'll do the exact same thing I did before, which was to trace frame 1 and just move it down slightly. Okay, for frame 19, what I'm going to do is I'll delete it now because we've got that original guide. And I'm just going to put it ever so slightly below where frame 1 was, just so that when it comes back to loop, it's not exactly the same. Okay, and there you can see we've got our bouncing body. So let's go to show frame. I'm going to turn on this button here, which is the looping button. Alt-Shift-L is the option for that. And then I'm just going to drag this little blue bar out until it fills our timeline so that when I press space, we can see it starting to bounce properly. That looks pretty good to me. I think it hangs in the air a little bit long, so what I might do is try removing these last 2 frames with just a right click. That looks much better to me, okay? And that's because we just duplicated that last frame, frame 1 and frame 19. Oh, hey. I didn't see you there. I was just taking a break from doing the animation on this intro to Adobe Animate series, which I don't know about you, but I've found really useful. If only there was a way that I could thank the person who made this series. Oh wait, I already have, because I bought this t-shirt from youtube.com/TipTut/store. You can get this t-shirt, hoodies, dog hoodies, pencil cases, all sorts of merchandise from youtube.com/TipTut/store. Or alternatively, if you're not into the dopest, finest, premium quality tees and you aren't a fan of merch, you could alternatively click that join button below to become a member of TipTut and join the TipTut Zone along with all of the other members for exclusive perks and benefits to the channel. I'm not very good at adverts. Back to the video. So that's the basics of what I'm going to do for the rest of this character, is add in the keyframes that I need, use guides if I need to, And we're going to go through now and just add the head and the legs as well. Now the head is exactly the same process as this ball, apart from we're going to have it rotating around the body. So what I like to do is I'm just going to add a new layer on top, select all of these layers again, frames again, convert to frame by frame animation, keyframe every other frame. So now I've got an exact duplicate but empty of the lower layer below. Then going to grab a bright red brush, and I'm going to go to the frame which most closely resembles that frame we've got here, which I'm going to say is this one. And where the head is, I'm just going to draw a dot for where I want the head to connect to the body. Okay. Now I could work backwards, I could work forwards, but essentially I want this to rotate in a nice and neat circle around the body. So by this point, I'm going to say his head will be here. On this next frame here, it's not going to have moved much, but it will have rotated a little bit. By here, I'm going to say it's going to be perfectly in line with the center. And then we know, but by this frame, it's just stretching out and boom. It's hit the floor and snaps down. On our next frame, it's going to be facing down on the floor. Our next one here, it's going to do quite a quick movement, but it'll work in motion, trust me. So it's going to move around to the other side of the body. Here, it's going to be up this side of the body. And by here, it's going to be back up at the top. And then if we watch that in cycle, it's kind of spinning around. It does jump a little bit. So on that first frame, I'm just going to move it back slightly. And on those squished frames, I might just, let's just forego the rules here, I think. And let's change it so that his head is completely upside down as he hits the floor here, because that's going to be a little bit nicer. I'll move it so his head's lower here, hits the floor, it's upside down. This side will just move his head over this way a little bit. As it's squishing, it's going to continue to turn. And that should make a little bit of a better. Cool. So now we're going to use that red dot to just draw a circle for the head. And I'm going to fast forward through this section because it's exactly the same as the body. And I want to make sure you guys just aren't straight up copying me. So what we're going to do is add, we'll call this head, rough head. And using my black pen, just eyedropping with I key there, I'm going to start drawing my character's head. Again, I'm going to start maybe on, let's start on the first frame. Why not? I'm going to zoom in. And you have to think about the forces that are applied to their head. So I'm going to say something like that for the first bit. Slightly smaller than body, but otherwise a circle. I forgot to add in, oh no, I didn't, sorry, I'm on the right layer, that's fine. At this point, the head started to move, so it's going to stretch a little bit as it rotates, and so on. Okay, so there you can see it, just a quick addition of the head rotating around the body there. So now we've got the basic form of our character bouncing up and down. On top of this, it's now time to add all of the details. We'll do the arms and legs in one go together, and then I'll go back through and do the facial features in time-lapse mode because they're quite simple. Okay, so we're going to add a new layer on top. We're going to select all of these layers, right-click, convert to frame by frame, keyframe every other frame, and now we've got a duplicate but empty. We're going to go to rough, and we'll call this rough limbs. Now, I'm going to go to, let's say this frame here. I'm going to turn off onion skin so it's a little bit easier to see. At this point, his body's falling straight through the air. Everything's forced down upon him, but his head has made solid connection with the ground already. Yeah, bam. So his arms might, which were previously up like this, might bend, okay? So we're just going to try and attach this to his body. We can use little points if we wanted to, so we could go through and we could just say, these are the points where his arms would attach, but I'm just going to run straight through and do it straight ahead. At this point, I'm going to say his arms are still pretty much outstretched, but otherwise just a little bit crooked. And we'll draw in his fingers because why not? This arm here as well, we're going to have it following the same kind of trajectory. Because he's spinning as he moves as well, you need to make sure that if possible, your arms are like following the curvature of that spin, okay? So let's start there with those arms like this. I'm going to go back a frame, turn my onion skin on. And then I'm going to hide my sketch layer just so it's a bit easier to see. And it's just a case of drawing something, adjusting it if needs be, so that you get nice curves between the previous frame and the next frame. Yeah. So when you flip back and forth between the two, you can kind of see where that motion is going to come from. Same thing goes for here. We'd add probably a little bit of a curve to the arm, like so. He's hit the floor now and his body has started to turn. So to help draw the viewer's eye with that, you just make sure that there's a little bit of overlap with those arms. You know, the arm's now on the other side of his body, but there's no reason that it can't come through like that, so that the path of motion for that particular arm is quite similar. I think I just drew that on the wrong layer. Yes, I did, but that's okay. I'll just copy and paste it. It's only guides anyway, so it doesn't really matter. This next line here, all the energy has come out of his body, so I'm going to say that this arm is going to be pretty much flopped onto the floor now. And this arm over here has continued its downward trajectory because his body's spinning like this. So his arm would sort of force itself this way, I believe. But let's see if it looks good. No, it looks kind of janky, right? So what we'd probably do is select this, get rid of it. Oops, let me just lock those other layers so I don't accidentally select them. I think maybe then let's have his arm sort of fall this way instead. Yeah, that looks much better. Okay, so moving on. I think at this point his arm would start to drag itself back upwards, and this arm here would start to turn around the other way, because his nose is kind of over here now, right? So at this point, start to perhaps be dragged down like this from the force of the arms. And then by here, what we'll do is we will take those original frames again. If we unlock them, we'll take those original frames again. We'll hold Alt and drag them to the end, just so that whilst we're working on this loop, we can see what that original frame looks like. Here we're going to, what are we going to do? Here we're going to have his arms be facing, oops, I've gone into orange there. Here we'll have his arms facing the camera. And his like back arm whipping around like this. So that when we get into the, what is essentially the first frame, his arms are going to be kind of just curving up like this. Okay? Because now we can then transition to these sections here where his body rotates. Because at this point we'd have his arm start to curve upwards. This back arm starting to curve upwards too. So that when it comes to this next frame, it looks more like a seamless loop. Okay, we'll remove these frames again because we don't need them. It's losing a little bit of impact because although his body hits the floor, his arms here should already be flat, I think. So let's fix that by selecting the arm layers. Ah, yes, I'd drawn those on the wrong layer, didn't I? So let's select that with a loop tool and just delete that. Again, doesn't matter because this is only the sketch, so it doesn't matter too much if it's not that neat. And I think what we'll do is we'll just draw the arms like a simple ease, just ahead of their previous or their next coming up position. So bam, you get a bit more of a solid splat on the floor there. Great. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing with the legs now, but it uses the same principle, so I'll fast forward through this section. Okay, so there we go. As you can see, I did pretty much the same thing for the legs there. If we just flip through this frame by frame, you'll notice that I've got the legs following the same trajectory as the body, rotating around. hitting down, squashing onto the floor there with the arms, rotating, coming up the other way on the other side of the body, and then eventually looping back around to its original position, like so. So now we've got the arms, legs, and head attached, but we haven't yet done the features. So I'll just pop those features on a new layer using the same technique as before. Right-click, keyframe every other frame. And all this animation is going to be on 2s because it's fairly consistent. There's nothing moving terribly quickly. If you wanted to, you could flap the hair about on this one on 1s. I'm going to leave it on 2s just for ease of use for this tutorial, but feel free to do that if you'd like. I am going to draw the face in a different color rather than black. Let's do it in something like bright green, just so it's really easy to see. And I'll turn back on my sketch layer so that I can see the original kind of facial structure here. So we want these big green googly eyes with the sort of cross-eyed effect and an upturned, upset mouth with just a simple tongue in it. There's also the 3 bumps for the hair and a sort of semi half circle with a lip for the hat. Okay. This one we will turn the onion skin on, and this is just a case of just making sure that you're tracking the position of the eyes to the position of the head. As the head rotates, obviously, so will its features. And you need to make sure that you're rotating those features with it. Also that they're not growing and shrinking too much, but also, most importantly, that you add in the emotion here. Okay, so I've got the cross-eyed to make him look really confused, but at the same time, as he hits the floor here, his eyes should almost certainly squint shut and his mouth would turn into like a grimace of pain, okay? Not only that, but you can add in funny stuff like his hat gets completely flattened and his hair as well. And then at this point, you could even have his hair on backwards as his face just gets dragged along the grass here. Maybe his eyes and his mouth open up again by this point. Just so you can get some of that emotion back in. And it's just a case of trying to make sure that you maintain the direction on these details. Here it's mostly the hair and the tongue of the hat that you need to make sure aren't losing direction. This is a bit of a different one because he's now looking kind of downwards like this. So we need to draw the hat like so. And if you can't see the hair, it will look strange. So we'll just add it kind of on the side of his head. You know, why not? He's a simple enough character. Maybe he's a cartoon, so his features do erupt off of his face a little bit. By this point, the hat's starting to come back to the right way, so we can draw the hair in a bit easier. But again, his facial features showing that emotion. And this is the frame before the last. So we will just drag out over these frames again with the Alt key. Just so that we're not making them too different by accident. 1, 2, and then 3 bits of hair. And then the mouth there, like that. So we're leaving these as pretty loose because this is just the roughs for this section. But let's take a look. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. He bounces nicely. He's got all of his limbs moving in the right directions, all that sort of stuff. He goes a little bit off screen, but not to worry. We'll be dealing with that next episode when we deal with our symbols. For now, though, practice this. Make sure that this guy is moving to a situation that you're happy with. Once he is, you'll be doing the next section, which is, firstly, you just name this rough face. But the next section is to add a new layer on top. Right-click, convert to frame by frame, keyframe every other keyframe. So there you go, same as before. Lock and outline all of the below layers. Hide your sketch layer. And if you'd like to, hide your guide layer as well. And at this point, I'd probably drag the guide below everything else. Now you get to do the fun bit, which is inking. Now, inking is just the process of drawing your neat lines. So I'm just going to grab a black pen, make sure I'm happy with the size, and I'm just going to go through and try to make it as neat as possible. I'll fly through this bit because there's no real technique to it. It's just trying to draw what you've already drawn just a little bit neater. So I'll see you on the other side. Okay, so there we have it, our looping line work animation. Now I'm just going to hide all of these guide layers by clicking and dragging over this eye icon here, which will just leave us with our line work, and you can see what we're working with. I think that looks pretty good. Like I said, we've drawn him a little bit high up. We'll have to shift him down, but don't worry, we'll be talking about that next episode when we get into working with symbols inside of Adobe Animate. So that is it for this time around. Have a play, redraw him a couple of times if you're not happy with how he's bouncing around, but hopefully this has given you a little bit of an introduction in how to work with frame by frame animation inside Adobe Animate. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and I'll see you next time for the next episode of this series on TipTut. I'd like to say a massive thank you to my level 2 and above members: Ghosts, WN62, Anonymous, Mel M. Hoover, Maybe Sharma, Ralika M, Mun336, Ian Costello, Dushyant Sinj, DaVinci Goel, and Lone Wolf 16. Thank you very much, everyone. You're making a very Merry Christmas here at TipTut. If you'd like to become a member of the TipTut Zone to get access to exclusive perks such as discounts, access to the Discord, shoutouts on videos, and personal design feedback, please consider hitting that join button below.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.
Let's learn how symbols and tweening can help you in your animation process.
TipTut.
Welcome back to Intro to Adobe Animate 2021. In this episode, I'll teach you all about the different types of symbols available in Animate, how and when to use them, and the tweening options that using these symbols allow for. If you don't know what any of that meant, then you're in the right place. So let's get right to it. Part 3, Symbols and Tweening. So what are symbols? Well, whenever you draw something in Adobe Animate, it's known as a shape, and you're editing it directly. Turning that shape into a symbol, don't worry, we'll get to the how later, takes that shape and wraps it up inside its own container. You then have to enter that container or symbol to continue editing the shape directly. Why is this important? Well, the biggest benefit of this is twofold: nesting and tweening. When you make a symbol, the content is wrapped up and given its own timeline that works in tandem with the main timeline. This is known as nesting and allows you to easily loop, repeat, or select specific segments of that symbol's timeline and play them in your main timeline, a bit like pre-composing in After Effects if you're familiar. Basically, you can animate something once and use it over and over again, which is brilliant. Also, making symbols allows you to tween your animations. Tween is short for in between and allows you to give the computer 2 keyframes and let the computer figure out what happens in between. Aside from a very primitive form of shape tweening, which you can do on shapes that aren't symbols, all tweening in Adobe Animate is done on the symbol itself, not on its nested content. A great example of this is a walk cycle. Inside a symbol, you animate your character walking in place, then on your main timeline, you just do 2 keyframes and tween your character between them. The rest of the types, details, and limitations about symbols and tweens are best explained in the software. So let's jump right into some examples and then apply the relevant techniques to our animation. Okay, so here we are inside Adobe Animate. I'm going to take you first through the 3 types of symbols that you can create. Then after that, I'm going to be showing you the different types of tweens you can use to manipulate those symbols. We'll cover a few other things along the way, but that's the main section. And then once we've done that, we'll see how we can apply it to the animation we created previously, which was of our bouncing character here.
We're going to turn him into a symbol so that we can manipulate him a bit better. Then we're going to add some more content into the background, which will add their own layers and their own symbols too. But before we get to that bit, it's best to explain how to actually use symbols. So whenever you draw something in Adobe Animate, you'll notice that you can directly select it and directly manipulate it. If you hover over the edges of your shape, you can pull out and push in all the different shapes and sections of it according to the points of the shape that you created. This is the same regardless of whether you've made it with the pen tool, the brush tool, the shape tool, whatever, doesn't matter. You end up with a shape that you can manipulate to your heart's content. Now, if I give my timeline just some frames here so it's a bit easier to see, I've got to frame 60 with F5 there. You will notice that I can select my shape and hit F8, and this will convert that shape to a symbol. Now, the symbol, like we spoke about in the previous section, will wrap this up in its own container and give it its own timeline. Now, there are 3 types of main symbol. As you can see from this drop-down menu, you have graphic, button, and movie clip. We're going to talk about graphics and buttons today, but not really talk about graphics and movie clips today. Sorry, we're not really going to talk about buttons because buttons are mainly for web development and action script like Flash games, which this series doesn't really cover. This series covers animation. There's not really much use for buttons in a modern day Animate workflow, so we're going to ignore those. We'll show you the difference between graphic and motion clip or movie clip though, because there are some slight differences that will benefit you later down the line. So we're going to call this one graphic, just so I know for sure that we are working on our graphic. So I'll call it graphic 1. And we're going to leave the registration point in the center. You don't really use that again for animation. You more use your anchor point, which you can manipulate separately. And the advanced tabs, we're just going to twirl those down as well, because that's mostly again for web development and Flash game creation. So we have our shape here, and now that we have turned it into a symbol, you'll notice there is a blue bounding box, a bit like the stuff I drew earlier. Okay, I can still manipulate this by squashing and stretching it, and positioning it however I want, but you'll notice that I can't now directly select the edges and manipulate the shape like I just did. Instead, it will just make me move it around. And that's because we've wrapped up everything inside a container here, inside its own symbol. So if you double click on that shape that you just made, it will take you inside the symbol, as you can see from this menu up here in the top left, and that will allow you, to directly edit the shape however you please, okay? And you'll also notice your timeline down at the bottom here has changed as well, and that's because every symbol has its own unique timeline, like we discussed before. So for example, if I go back to my main scene now, you can see that it's manipulated and changed that shape, and it's respected it in the canvas. It's also added it as an item to our library, so I can drag that out from my library and add it to my stage as many times as I want. These are instances of the same symbol. So if I go inside any single one of them and I manipulate it, you'll see it will update on every single other symbol on the stage. Okay, quite useful. Now, what is the difference between a graphic and a motion clip or movie clip? Well, I'll show you. Go inside your graphic. I'm just going to draw a circle on our first frame. Okay, and on our third frame, because we're animating on 2s here, like we spoke about in the last episode, I'm going to add a square. Okay, so now inside our graphic 1 graphic, we've got a circle changing into a square. Not very well animated, but it serves the point. If we go back to our main scene now, you'll notice that the timeline changes back to our main timeline, and if I hit play, it will flit and loop between those 2 shapes, okay? Now, this is very useful because, like, for example, if this wasn't just a circle and a square, if this was, say, a stick man, and we can have him wave. Again, we'll not win any prizes for our drawings here, but you can see how we can now have our animation looping, and this can be quite useful. Good for walk cycles, good for repeating and looping animations, etc., etc. Essentially, you're wrapping up your own animation in its own symbol and then applying information to inside of and outside of that symbol. So graphics. What's the difference between a graphic and a movie clip? Well, if I drag out my graphic, I'm going to add a new layer on top, and I'm going to draw a red stick man. And this one can be, I don't know, tapping his foot angrily or something. I'm going to select him, and you'll see it's easy to see what is and isn't a symbol because your symbol has a blue bounding box and your shapes do not. If I select my shape, my red stick man, hit F8, and this time convert it to a movie clip, and we'll call this one movie clip 1 or newbie clip 1 apparently, and hit OK. I'm going to do the same thing inside this movie clip as I just did inside that graphic. I'm going to give myself a new frame to work with. And let's have him tapping his foot a little bit. Okay. So when I hit enter, I should expect this to play, but it does not. Okay. And that's the main difference really between a movie clip and a graphic in terms of working with one. Your movie clip will only play when you test your movie. Okay. And then it will animate. Now, there is a reason for this. It goes into the code of how the program works and stuff like that. But the main thing and the main difference between graphics and movie clips is what you can do to the symbol itself. Okay, so if we go to our properties panel and I select my graphic, you'll see that we have some similar options regardless of the one that we select, but we do have some different ones as well. So if I select my graphic here, you can see that I can change the looping to however I want, and this is quite important. I can set my graphic to loop forever, which is fine. I can set it to play once, which means that it will play just once and then stay still on its last frame, which can be useful in some circumstances. I can choose a single frame from the graphic and then open up my frame picker, which allows me to just select what frame I want to show. And this is useful for lip syncing. I can then also, if I close off my frame picker, choose it to play once in reverse, or I can choose it to loop in reverse. So you'll notice that when I select my graphic, I get all these good looping options. When I select my movie clip, those options do not appear, but we get some different ones instead. Noticeably, under color effects for graphic, you can just change brightness, tint, advanced, and alpha, which, we explained a little bit about in the previous episode, but you can adjust the color essentially by applying a filter over your graphic. Okay, we can just turn that back to none. On the movie clip, yes, you get those same options, but you also get additional options similar to you might find in Photoshop or Illustrator. For example, you can change the blending mode, and you can add certain filters to your graphic. So if I just blend those down, you can see, for example, I can add things like a drop shadow to my symbol, but I cannot add anything like that to my graphic. So graphics, you get more control over the looping and the in-software control of the symbol. Movie clips, you get less control over that, but you get more control over the visuals applied to that specific symbol. How and when you should use them depends entirely on your project and what you're doing, okay? There are tons of filters that I'm not going to go through, but you can see what they do if you just click them. You can add glows to the outside of your character, maybe in bright yellow, and just crank that up so you can see it. If you've worked in Photoshop or Illustrator, you'll understand these at a glance. If you don't, just have a play around with them. It really is that simple. I'll quickly show you a button, even though we're not going to use one. Maybe I'm going to just add, because you might find it useful. I'll add a rectangle with a triangle in it, and that's going to be like a play button. So I'll hit F8 and I'll turn that to a button. Buttons are quite unique in that they have their own specific timeline you can't change. There's just 4 positions: up, over, down, and hit. So you can say up is when the mouse is not touching the button. Over is when the mouse is hovering over the button. So I could change that to red there, for example. Down is what it looks like when the mouse has clicked the button. So you might scale it up a little bit. And hit is the area in which the computer considers the button. So you draw the area that you want the button to be. If I then go and test our film, you can see what happens when we hover and click the button as well. Yeah. So not useful really for animation anymore, but if you're working on some kind of Flash game or something, then it would be. Obviously Flash is now dead, so you can't really do that. So that is the 3 different types of symbols: graphics, motion clips or movie clips, and buttons. Okay, they all have their own uses. I pretty much exclusively work with graphics just because of the style of my animations. But you're not here for boring stuff like that. You are here for interesting stuff like how to make these motion clips or graphics or whatever move about in clever ways. So let's talk a little bit about tweening. So much like in the same way there are 3 types of graphics, there are also 3 types of tween. There are shape tweens, there are classic tweens, and there are motion tweens. I'm going to take them through one by one from the simplest to the most complicated. So a shape tween is the only tween that you can apply directly to a shape rather than a symbol. So to illustrate this, I will draw myself not a wobbly line, but a circle. There we go. I will go a few frames into the future, say 1 second. I'll hit F7. I'll turn on my onion skin and I'll draw a triangle. Trying to keep this as neat as possible on the other end of the frame there. Okay. I'm going to use my Q tool, transform tool to just neaten up that triangle a little bit. There we go. And just to make it interesting, I'll also make it a red triangle. So now we have a black circle and a red triangle. I'm going to right click anywhere between those 2 keyframes and I'm going to choose create shape tween. And with the onion skin on, you can automatically see what it's going to do. It's going to generate every frame in between there to the best of its ability. Now, it's important to note that whilst the computer does its best to do this, if it's a complicated shape, it is not going to work on a shape tween. It's just impossible. The computer can't figure it out. Okay. For example, if I were to hide this layer and on the layer beneath it, do something like this. And then on the next frame, do something like this. So I'll stick that one, 30 frames down like we did before. And I try and shape tween between these. You're not going to get the expected result. Okay. Now, technically, what the computer has done is 100% mathematically change from one shape to the next, but it is probably not your intended effect. Okay. It is mathematically correct, but it is not good. It doesn't look good. And this is one of the limitations of working with tweens in any form. Simple shapes, going from a simple black circle to a simple red triangle, very useful for the computer to handle. Complicated stuff, not so much. One thing you can do to make this look a little bit nicer, however, is to edit the easing. So if you select any point between your 2 keyframes, it will bring up in your properties panel a tweening panel over here. And you can choose how to ease your properties. You can choose to ease your properties together, which is kind of the only option for shape tweening. And then you can choose from here, your effects panel, a path, a motion path, or a speed path, I should say, not a motion path. From that, you can choose different ways to ease that motion in or out. So for example, if I choose ease in, and then I choose something like quart, you can see that it's going to go from very fast to very slow. Very slow to very fast. So it's going to start off slow and then whip into that faster shape. And it's going to reposition the timing of those keyframes. It's going to have the same changes, the same shape changes, but just on a different time. If I choose ease in out, for example, and choose the same one, quart, you'll notice it will go slow to fast to slow again and kind of whip through those positions. And this adds just a lot straight away to your animation. So shape tweening, very simple. In a later episode of this series, we'll be talking about shape hints, which will help in our shape morphing episode. And that will help you with slightly more complicated shapes, but we'll get onto that later because it's a bit of a sort of rabbit hole. So that is our shape tweening. And the only type of tweening that you can do on a basic shape rather than a symbol. The other 2 types of tweening, classic and motion, which you saw when I right-clicked here, classic and motion tween, can only be done on symbols. So let's take a symbol. Let's draw a circle. Actually, let's just draw our stick man again. So we have our stick man here, okay? I'm going to hit F8 and I'm going to call him stick, G for graphic. And we're going to make sure he is a graphic so that he plays in our timeline. And inside this graphic symbol, we're just going to add, again, another frame where he is in a slightly different position. Okay. This section of the tutorial isn't really about beautiful animation. It's about teaching you the concepts. So please forgive my stick man. Okay, so our stick man is now just going to loop between those 2 positions, which is great. Okay. So if I position him over on the left here, and then over on a later frame, I'll hit F6 and I'll pop him on the other side of the stage. I can right click and choose create classic tween. And you'll notice a purple bar between our 2 shapes, between our 2 keyframes, And it does pretty much the same thing as the shape tween, apart from it's done it on the graphic itself rather than on the direct content. What this means is I can go inside this symbol, change the content however I like, maybe give him an actual face, poor guy. And you'll notice that the animation of him moving across the stage is completely separate from the animation of him inside the symbol. Very useful. You can apply the same types of tweening as you can with the shape tween. You can also, which you can do on a shape tween too, click this little pencil icon here to create a custom ease. Sorry, that window appeared on the other screen there. And you can adjust this however you like using the handles. And you can test it as well by just clicking the play button. So I'll just position that back to roughly where it was before. Hitting save and apply. Once you do that, it's interesting to note, if you select the eases again, down in custom, it will save that one. So if you're happy with it and you like it and want to apply it to something else, you can save your eases from there. Classic tweens, very similar to shape tweens, apart from you just do them on a symbol. Okay. Apart from that, not really much difference. You can add a rotation in. So you could say, I want it to rotate clockwise one time during its transition, which it will then do. Quite useful for certain situations. And you've got all sorts of other things as well. You can orient a path, sync symbols, scale along path, all sorts of stuff. So here it will scale up from 0 to 100 if you select scale along path. Could be useful in certain situations, but if you're doing something that complicated, I would just animate it because you get lots more control. You can also see you have a orient to path option, which I can just briefly show you. If you draw a new layer with a sort of wiggly line on it, like so, and then you turn that layer to a guide layer by right-clicking and choosing guide, you can then drag your layer underneath it and it will sort of clip your layer to that guide. If you then position your character at the start of the line and the end of the line, you'll notice it'll work when the onion skin lines up correctly with your guide layer, and it will kind of snap to it a little bit. Like so. You see him snap there, and then he will move along the path like that, which can be quite useful. And then, of course, you just hide your guide layer, and you've got an orient to path, which can be pretty useful for certain situations as well. So when it comes to a classic tween, that's pretty much all there is to it. Okay, you've got easing that you can do via the easing panel. You've got rotation you can do via rotate panel, and then you've got different options down here for animating later on. Some of these things like sync symbols are a bit complicated for this point in the series. They are to do with like lip syncing and syncing up the inner frames of a symbol to your main timeline when you've manipulated it after the fact. So if there's an opportunity, we'll get into that later on. But I do cover it in other series of mine as well if you want to do that. So drop a comment below and I'll tell you all about it. But for now, we're trying to keep things fairly simple. So we've done shape tween and we have done classic tween. It's now time to do motion tween, which is probably the most complicated of all of them. So I'm just going to remove all of my frames, delete my guide layer. So I'm back to a normal timeline. I'm just going to once again drag out my stick man onto the stage. So I've just got one stick man on the stage animating between his two poses because that's what's happening inside the graphic. A motion tween works more similar to other Adobe softwares where you can separate out, if you right click and choose motion tween, you can separate out the properties that you'd like to manipulate. You'll notice that it will change your entire timeline to yellow, and you can manipulate your character by just selecting a frame and repositioning him and rescaling him however you'd like. So we'll just scale him down a bit. We'll move over, we'll position him over here. Maybe we'll scale him up a bit. And then we'll do the same thing over here. So you can see that we've got here what is essentially a motion path. And each dot on this motion path will show you a frame on our animation. So you can see the further apart the dots are on this line, the quicker the animation is going to go. The closer they are on this latest segment, the slower it's going to go. And you can manipulate that path. So if you double click on the layer, it will open up all of the properties, which looks quite scary, which is why I left this one to last. And you can see you can edit and manipulate the positions and properties of each of these properties by themselves. This is the scale, individual scale, so the X scale here, the scale Y as well. You could just put that down a little bit. So you can see that this manipulates in the same way as like line graphs or motion graphs in After Effects, if you're familiar. You'll also notice that if you go and change something on a frame that isn't currently keyframed, it will add a keyframe for you and add it to that path. To do eases on these, you can just double click on your little add ease option down here, and it has the same or similar ones as your classic tween, so stop and start, and that will add something over the top of your entire motion tween. Okay, and we'll go from start to stop as well. Again, quite complicated, and something that we're not really going to use in this series because I think it's too complicated for a beginner series. So if you're interested in working with this, I've made a separate video which just covers motion tweening, and I will link to that as well in the description when that is ready. So for now, though, we're going to focus just on classic tweens because A, that's all we need for our animation that we're working on, and B, it will cover 99% of the situations you need. If you want to work on motion tweens, go for it. It's just a bit more complicated, and I'm trying to keep this quite basic. So we've spoke about graphics, movie clips, and buttons, and we've spoken about classic, motion, and shape tweens. We've all done this in a void, and there's no point talking about stuff in a void. We should apply it to a project that we have made. So you can see here we're back in our project from before. We have all of our frames and timelines ready to go, and we've got our character bouncing up and down. This is what we finished last episode. What we're going to do now, because unfortunately I drew the character a little bit too high and he popped off of screen, we want to be able to move easily all of these frames. Now you can do this without turning it into a symbol, but it's a right ball ache, so we're going to turn it into a symbol to make it a lot easier. One of the most powerful things you can do in Adobe Animate is copy chunks of frames and put them in other places that you need. So I'm going to select everything. I've got my main character line work here. I'm going to select all of the rough layers, and I'm going to select the guide layer that we made, basically everything but the sketch. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose cut layers. And that's going to remove them from our main timeline. Now there's one more way to create a symbol which I haven't told you, and that is to go to insert new symbol. And this will create a symbol without putting anything on your stage. And we're just going to call this bounce. It's going to be a graphic, very important because we want to see it inside our timeline. We'll hit OK. And this is going to give us like a kind of void, empty void. You can see we don't have a canvas here. We've just got the white section that we need. And in here, down in this timeline, I'm just going to choose paste frames. There you go. So you can see that's pasted our frames inside this void. And if I zoom out a little bit, you can see this is our character here. So I'm going to lock all of the guide layers and turn them all off as well. So we've now just got in our bounce timeline section bit here, we've just got our character bouncing up and down. Like so. Okay, it looks pretty cool. So now this is the bouncy character in the void. Excuse me, I didn't actually cut those layers, so we'll just get rid of them there. So we have our character bouncing up and down in the void, and you can see he now also appears in our library. So what we're going to do is create a new layer here and call this bounce. And we'll drag him out from our library onto our stage. And you can see that he is there. We can position him up using the guide layers that we've made. Now, if like me, you have hidden your layers inside your symbol, but when you come back out of your symbol, you can see them again. That is just due to a publish setting that you need to turn off, which is just under File and Publish Settings. If you then uncheck Include Hidden Layers and hit OK, that will then hide all of your layers. Basically, you're hiding the layers in your preview, but it's still publishing them because it thinks you're just temporarily hiding them. Whereas if the way I like to work is if I hide a layer, it means I don't want it included. Okay. And now we can see we have our character bouncing up and down. He's already positioned a little bit better because we've popped him in the middle. But all I need to do now, if I want to manipulate him, is just change his position like this. I can make him a little bit bigger if I want. And I can make sure that the top of his head never goes off screen by just selecting him and moving him down a bit. Okay, so if you wanted to see this in action, you can just click your loop button here, drag out the loop to fill the complete section of frames that you need. And you can see now that we have our perfectly looping animation over and over again. But what we can do now is manipulate him and scale him really easily without having to worry about our keyframes. And because our properties for our graphic here is set to loop, he will loop forever for our whole animation, which is perfect. Okay. So let's turn on our sketch layer to see what we've got working in the background here. And I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm just going to call this one background. And we're going to start just drawing in the rest of our content. Now I'm going to lock my bouncing guy and hide him. And on the background layer, I'm just going to draw myself some lines for the mountains in the background. And you can probably guess what we're going to do next with them, which is convert them to a symbol. Now, if you have pretty much any static content in your animation, I would always recommend turning it into a symbol with F8, giving it a name, mountains, and then going inside that symbol to add layers, edit it, add colors, etc. The reason I say this is because if you leave it as a shape, you at some point are going to accidentally erase or select or delete a section of it, and then you're going to ruin your whole animation and to do loads of work to go back and actually fix it. If you convert it to a symbol, which is the main thing of converting it to a symbol, if I delete it, first of all, I can just undo it and I know that it's there again. But if I delete it accidentally, I can always just come back from my library and just drag it back out to the main stage. Okay. Also, if I grab my eraser tool and start erasing stuff on different layers, it's not going to affect anything in the symbol because the symbol is locked away and is kept safe. Okay. So what I'm going to do now in time-lapse mode is I'm just going to go through in different layers and add line outlines to all of the background and other elements, just so that when we come to our next tutorial, we've got some symbols to work with, but also because when we come to our next tutorial, we're going to have to be working with the camera. And when you work with the camera, it's best to have symbols ready to go so that when you position on their layer depths and things like that, they're all locked away and safe. So all I'm going to do is add a few more layers. So we've got background, which I'll just rename to mountains to make it easier. I'll draw a layer behind that for the sun and a layer behind that for the sky. So we'll call this one sky. We'll call this one sun. And then we need a layer in front of the mountains for the floor. And another layer in front of that for this guy in the background, which we'll just call man. And another layer in front of that for the grass, which we'll pop on top of the bounce layer, which is our bouncing man, because we want some tufts of grass. So in time-lapse mode, I'm just going to go through, draw these elements that I need on their own layers and turn them into symbols, and then we'll leave it there. Okay, so here you can see we have all of our symbols laid out on separate layers on our timeline here. Everything from the grass on this top layer here down through our bouncing man, our man in the background, our floor layer, our mountains, our sun, our clouds in the sky, and our sketch, which we now no longer need, so I can lock and hide that. We're now going to add some nice basic tweens to this just to get you guys started before we jump into the next episode, which I believe is adding color and everything to this scene. So, for example, we know we want this character here to be sort of sliding along the floor as if the camera is panning past. Now, we'll be doing some actual camera movements later on, but just to get you guys using some tweens, we're going to use a few tweens here to get this started. So let's do the floor first then. I'm going to double click on my floor graphic, and as you can see, this is just a graphic that I've drawn with a few tufty bits of grass and other bits there. Now, we're going to start by making sure we can get a perfect loop with this grass here. So we want our shape to start like this. So if we grab our scene, we can position our grass all the way over to the left. And what we're going to do is go inside it. Okay, we're going to select everything and holding Alt and Shift, we're just going to drag it over until it pretty much lines up with the next section like so. Okay. Now that's going to give us a twice long section than we need. And we'll just tidy up the point where it joins as well. Okay. So we've got a nice... I'm on paint behind mode. There we go. So we've got a nice long bit of floor that's much longer than we actually need it to be, with a seamless break in the middle, which is great. Now on our main timeline layer, we're just going to duplicate this, I think, twice by just hitting F5 to extend all of our frames. And then on the floor layer, we're just going to add a new keyframe at the end with F6. Okay. Now we're going to turn on our onion skin. And essentially, you'll notice a point where there is a tuft here, which duplicates with the same tuft over here. Okay. And you're just going to move your shape until that tuft lines up. Now you might have to just tweak a little bit, like so. But then when you right click and choose Create Classic Tween, it's going to be moving along. If you hit Control and Enter, you'll see your seamlessly looping section of grass there. Now we didn't use all of it, obviously, so you can make it as long or as short as you'd like. It doesn't really matter. It's completely up to you. But what we've got now is a seamlessly looping background, which looks like it's going on forever, when in fact it's only using a small portion of it. We're going to do this similar sort of thing with these grass tufts in the front here. If we double click them, select everything on that layer, duplicate them over again, like so. And then back on the main timeline, hit F6 on that last frame, turn on your onion skin, and drag over until it lines up perfectly, like so. Okay. Go to Show Frame, right click, Create Classic Tween. Now, you'd want these to move faster, but because they're closer to the camera, but we're actually going to be doing that with like camera depth later on, possibly. So for now, we'll have them moving at the same speed. It's not really a problem. That's why it didn't look correct earlier, because the full loop wasn't working. I accidentally left my loop on. If you want them to actually move faster, what you could do is drop inside, duplicate a third copy of your tufts, and then on your final keyframe, have it line up with the third copy, like so. And then you've got it moving really fast. So faster because it's closer to the camera, or the camera, which we haven't made yet. We'll be adding a real camera to this later on. I will show you how to use a real camera. Whether or not we actually add one to this scene remains to be seen. The final one to do then is the man. Now the man we're going to do a little bit differently. We're going to start him off screen. Then he's going to end off screen, so we don't have to duplicate him. We are going to do something cool with frame picking, so that as he passes by, he's going to turn a little bit as well. So we're going to go to the start of our animation. He wants to be looking kind of the other way almost. So I'm going to go inside my symbol here. And if this is a little bit too confusing with all the background stuff in, you can go to View Preview Mode Full, or View Preview Mode Outlines, whatever one you want to help you see better inside that graphic there. I like to use it on fast because I think that works the best. If it's too distracting, what you can do is go to your library and open up the man there, and he'll be in an isolated environment. I prefer seeing him in the environment that we're going to be working in though. So it's completely up to you. Right, so we're just going to add perhaps 3 poses to this character. The first pose is going to be this pose that we've drawn already, but we're just going to hit Modify, Transform, Flip Horizontal. Okay, so he's going to be facing the other way. And if we turn on onion skin, we can make it so that his feet line up, which is the most important thing. Then in the middle, we're going to delete that, and we're going to zoom in, and we're just going to draw a perfect in-between for this character. So we'll just draw his head, trying to get it exactly halfway between your blue and your green keyframes. like so. Okay, so the scarf at this point will just be down the middle. Oops. Like that. Okay. So not worrying too much about this. Just trying to get it looking okay because he's in the background. No one's really going to be looking at him. The idea being then that we can then just choose to frame pick these frames at points when he's moving across the screen, which will then allow us to quickly and easily change his angle. So you can see we have these 3 frames of our character now. So it looks like he's turning around a little bit. We're going to go back to scene 1. We're going to go to our man. We're going to go into properties, select the symbol and just choose single frame. And just to double check that it's done that on the last one too, we'll go to our last frame here and we'll check single frame as well. Now we've got our guy moving across the screen. As he hits, I'd say about here, we want him to change direction. So we're going to choose that frame. Click our man, go to our frame picker window, which if you don't see, you can just hit window frame picker and it should pop open like so. You select your symbol and then just choose single frame, give him a keyframe there and just choose number 2. Move along, I'd say to about here, hit F6 and choose frame 3. And now as he moves along, he's going to change direction. Nice and subtle. Because he's moving already, just adds a little bit extra to your animation. Okay, so let's hit save, Control Enter, and we've got our guy moving along in the background watching our dude. So as you can see, that's pretty much all there is to it. We're going to be adding all sorts of extra things as well, like color and proper stuff like that. But in terms of tweening and graphics and stuff, that's pretty much it. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I appreciate there was a lot of information in this one, so do feel free to go back, ask questions in the comments, watch it again. I always try and respond to the comments that you do leave, so feel free to do so. But also just have fun with it, explore, maybe don't draw your man in the background, maybe have different grass tufts than mine, maybe add like a tree or something. Just basically explore and experiment and see what works for you. Next time we'll be adding color to this scene, which is one of my favorite bits, and then we'll be exploring further into the world of Adobe Animate. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you all next time on TipTut. I'd like to say a massive thank you to my level 2 and above members: Ghosts, WN62, Anonymous, Mel M. Hoover, Maybe Sharma, Ralika M, Mun336, Ian Costello, Dushyant Sinj, DaVinci Goel, and Lone Wolf 16. Additionally, we hit 40 members of the TipTut Zone this month, so thank you so much to everybody that has joined. You truly are Tip Titans through and through. If you'd like to join the TipTut Zone and get access to a whole bunch of really cool perks, consider clicking that join button below.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.
Let's explore the color workflow in Adobe Animate together.
TipTut.
Welcome back to Intro to Adobe Animate 2021. In this episode, we explore working with color both in theory and in the software, and we'll do some practical work by adding color to our animation, which at the moment is looking a little bit unfinished. So let's get right to it. Part 4: Color, Gradients, and Effects. Picking the right colors for an animation is a skill unto itself, but if you know a little bit of color theory, it can be much less daunting. When picking colors, you should look for a few key things: contrast and harmony. You can see which colors complement each other by using the color wheel as a starting point. Now, I have a video on color theory which goes into much more detail, so watch that if you'd like a deep dive into color theory, but I'll explain the basics here. Complementary colors are those that are directly opposite each other on the color wheel. This doesn't mean that they are the best and only combination, it just means that they have the most contrast between each other in terms of hue. There are other types of color palettes that pick from different parts of the color wheel, and a great way to explore this is with Adobe Color at color.adobe.com. There are tons of tools out there similar to this one, but this is as good as any. So I'm going to take you through 2 different color selection tools, essentially. It's going to be color.adobe.com and coolers.co. Color.adobe gives you a bit more nuanced control in terms of color harmonies, and coolers is a great starting point if you've got no idea what you want. So we've spoken about complementary colors, and a complementary color is opposite on the color wheel. And what Adobe Color does is give you 5 colors to start with, and you can just drag around your color wheel here. Find a particular shade that you'd like, for example, this kind of rich pink color, and it will automatically find the complementaries and a couple of shades or tints to go along with that complementary color, which is great. Incidentally, you can also adjust within the confines of that color harmony, in this case complementary. You can adjust the shades and tints and saturations and things as well. There's analogous, monochromatic, triad, split complementary, double split complementary. Like I said, I'm not going to go through the theory of this. I've done that in a different episode, but I am going to say that if you go and click around on these, you will clearly see which ones give you more or less color selections to pick from. In this case, we're going to need, I think, approximately 3 main colors. If we take a look at our file here in Adobe Animate, we're going to need something for the grass, something for the sky and mountains, and something for our main character here. There's obviously going to be additional other colors that you're going to see in the animation, but it's mostly going to be 3 main colors. I quite like this guy to be pink, and I'd like to maintain some kind of accurate color system with green grass and blue sky. So for example, in Adobe Color, I might choose a split complementary, which gives me 3 main colors, and place one of them on pink. And you'll notice you'll be able to adjust with your base color. So if I chose this base color here as pink, I can adjust individually the split complementary, because all split complementary means is you have to have an equidistant amount between the opposite complementary color. So the opposite of pink here would be green, and the split complementary would be an equidistant color from either side of that green. So you could choose, for example, something closer to blue. Now, just because these colors are in this palette doesn't necessarily mean that I need to use them all. For example, if I like this pink and these 2 shades of blue, I don't need to use the yellows. I could pick another one. For that instance, double split complementary might be a little bit better. Basically play around, see if you can find something that you like. Now, I like to use coolers.co because I can just press the space bar and it will bring up 5 new unique colors to work with. And additionally, if you find a color within a palette that you like, for example, once I find a nice hot pink here that I quite like the look of, I can lock off an individual color and then keep generating new ones that fit within that palette until I find something that I like again. For example, maybe this color for the sky, I can lock them off and it will continue to find colors that work well. Now, when I say complementary here, I don't mean in terms of the color wheel complementing the opposite side of the color wheel. I just mean colors that look good together. Yeah. Now, what I like to do is start off with one color that I know I'm going to like. So this pink, for example, and maybe a blue as well that I like, and then go into Adobe Animate and from there use a few different tricks that I've learned to generate the rest of my colors. I mainly use sites like this as a starting point, and then from there I can tweak to my own needs within the certain file that I'm working on. So let's jump right into that and we'll carry on from there. Okay, so here we are in Adobe Animate. As you can see, I've got the 2 colors, pink and blue, that I liked from my color palette. And using these, we're going to generate all the necessary shades and tints and things that we need for the rest of our animation. Now, these are just some rectangles that I dragged out onto the stage. You can pick the fill color from this box down here and the stroke color from this box down here. You'll notice when you select them, you get a whole bunch of predefined colors. I don't recommend that you use these. You can if you'd like, but they're just not, everyone's going to use them if they're there. You need to use something that's a bit more of your own. So I'm just going to zoom in down here on my colors so that we can see what we're working with. And I'm just going to, holding Alt and Shift, I'm just going to drag out a few copies of these colors as well, like so. Now let's first talk about tints and shades and how to find darker and lighter copies of a color that you enjoy. Now you could just go select a color, choose Window, and color to bring up the color box here. And you could just say, all right, I'm just going to add some more black to that color. And voila, we've got a darker shade of that pink. But you'll notice that it starts to look a little bit muddy because all we've done is add some more shade, i.e. adding direct black to that color, which is going to make it look muddy because it's just direct black. We're just decreasing the amount of light or increasing the amount of pigment, depending on how you want to work. What I prefer to do is a technique called hue shifting. And what hue shifting is you can select a slightly darker color within your pink. Sure, that's no problem. But as you can see, you get a little bit of that muddiness back in there. So hue shifting is you just take your hue slider and you shift it more towards a warmer or cooler color. For example, you can go more slightly towards red and then choose the darker instance, or you could go more slightly towards pink and then choose the darker instance, and try to maintain that feeling of warmth. And as you can see, we then get a slightly darker version of the pink without it looking muddy. You can go back towards the red and you get a more red one, obviously. But if we just copy out a few examples here, and I'll see if I can can't really make the window bigger, but that's fine. Essentially, you just hue shift a little bit, like so, decrease the brightness just a little bit, like so, and increase the saturation a little bit, and you get a less muddy. It's not really a shade, but it works as a darker color. If you wanted it to be even darker, you could push it further down like this, but just by hue shifting that just a little bit, you can see how you reduce that amount of muddiness. Now, if you like the muddiness, that's fine, but I really don't. So that's one technique to get a darker option, and you can do a similar one to get a shade, a tint as well. So let's first get a shade. Let's go just a little bit more towards red, I think, a little bit darker down, and boom, there's the shade of our pink. Let's take the same one. I'm going to go a little bit more towards pink this time, and then add some light to get 3 shades of pink that I like to work with. Let's do the same thing for the blue. So the blue here, I'm going to go a little bit more towards the green, and we're going to just grab a bit more darkness in there for a nice dark shade of blue. I'm not too sold on that. I might go a touch back. That's much better, more towards the blue as opposed to the green. This one here, let's try going towards the green and lighting it up just a little bit. Bam. So now we've got 3 shades of blue and 3 shades of pink, which is pretty good. We are definitely going to need a green though. So I'm going to select my middle color again, which remember was my base color. I'm going to go up like so. And I'm going to select all of these because we're just choosing the base green here. And I'm just going to hue shift until I find a starting point green that I quite like around here. Now that looks way too saturated, and that's because obviously different amounts of light work differently depending on the hue that you've selected. So I probably would desaturate this just a little bit, especially because we'll be using it in the backgrounds, until I get a green that I'm fairly happy with, which I think that's pretty much there. And at this point, you're basically just eyeballing it until you find a color that you like. But try to maintain in the middle row a similar amount of like value. And what value is like the cumulative amount of light, darkness, hue, everything mixed together to get this value that is like the finished result. And you'll be able to see if something is too saturated, it's going to have more value. I'm not sure if that's the technical way to use the term, but it's the way that I use it. So I'm going to do the same thing for the green. I'm going to shift a little bit more towards blue and perhaps add some darkness to it. So with hue shifting there, you can see we don't get that muddiness that we did get before. I'm going to shift a little bit more towards this turquoise color and add some light. And we've got 3 shades of green. And as you can see, we've got a fairly good looking complementary palette there to start working with. But now that we have these colors here, we probably want to add them to our actual swatches. And we want to learn how to use gradients within these as well to add some more color control. So if you open up your swatches window, you'll see here that if I pull this out, I have my default selection of swatches, and I've got an already made selection of colors here, which I've put together previously, obviously because I've made this all already. Now, working with swatches is great because you've got 2 different types of swatches that you can use. You can add just a basic swatch by going to a new folder. I'm just going to call this one test because I'll be removing it later on. I can select one of my dark greens, click the test folder and click add, and that will add that swatch to your folder here, which is great. We can do the same thing with the next one. Same thing with the next one, and so on until we get our full list of colors inside our palette. And they'll be added in the order in which you select them. So it's up to you how to group these. I like to group them by color. Some people like to group them by shade. Some people like to group them by other stuff. I think it works best when you can see all of your correct colors like so. Now, if you go to your color window again, window and color up here, you'll notice you've got some different options such as solid color, linear gradient, radial gradient, or bitmap fill. Now, a solid color is exactly as you suggest. You eyedropper with the eye tool, eye keyboard shortcut to pick a color, and it will show you a solid color and show you the hex code, RGB value for that, etc., etc. We want to work with some gradients though. So I'm going to choose linear gradient. And what you can do with a linear gradient is double click on one end of the gradient. It will bring up your swatches window, and you'll notice we've got our swatches in it here. So I could choose, for example, my light green, do the same on the other end, but choose my dark green. And I now have a gradient. And with this add to swatches button, I can add, if you just click and drag across from the default swatches, I can add a linear gradient to my swatches, which means that I can draw using a gradient, which is incredibly powerful. Now, once you've added all of the gradients and different combinations you think you might need to your color palette, you'll end up with a folder full of everything that you need. I'm just going to delete my test folder, and I'm going to delete my default swatches folder. So I've just got Intro to Adobe Animate 2021 with all of my colors in the swatch panel. I'm then going to hit Save Colors, call it Intro to Adobe Animate 2021, hit Save. Yes. Now what this means is I can pull up this whenever I want by just hitting, well, Clear Colors, first of all. I can hit Replace Colors, load my color palette in, and use it in any different project that I want. It will give you all the default swatches back, but that's fine. You can just close that folder down. Okay. I find it quite useful to have my default swatches panel open. Just like hovering up here in the left, and you can click this little label to collapse it, and then you can just open and close at a click. And what we can do now is go through and add these colors to our palette, and we will see how we can control our linear gradients and things like that, and add highlights and things to give ourselves a bit more control over our animation here. So let's do the background first, because that's going to be quite simple. So I'm going to grab my clouds layer, double click to go inside the graphic. And if you remember here, what we've got is our individual cloud. So one cloud on its own layer and another cloud on its own layer. So I'm going to select both of these clouds, open up my swatches panel, and give them just a white outline. Okay. Inside these white outlines now, I'm going to select my paint bucket with K, and I'm going to fill them in with white as well, like so. So we've just got two white clouds. And just to make it easier to see, I am going to drag them off as well, like this. Okay. Now, one thing I like to do with clouds and with lots of my colors really is add a linear gradient on top of my flat color, so that you can add a bit more depth without too much extra work. Just fill in that tiny dot there. To do that, I like to select both of these objects here, Control C, and on a layer above them, I just hit Control Shift V, and that will place them paste them in place. From there, I'll go back, and I've created a linear gradient that goes from white to my first blue color here. And I'm just going to click that, and that's going to apply it across my clouds. Now, you can control whether it's radial or linear, doesn't matter. You can control your gradient with your gradient tool. If you don't see your gradient transform tool, it's hidden underneath the free transform tool. If you long press on that, you'll get gradient transform tool. The shortcut for that is F, by the way. And it'll open up this little overlay, which at first might look confusing, but it's actually quite simple. Essentially, you have the center of your gradient here. You can control that by clicking and dragging your dot around, and you'll notice I can pull the entire shape around like this. Then you have two controls on the edges here. A circle at the edge will allow you to rotate your gradient, so change the direction of it. And pulling in or out on this arrow will increase or decrease the width of your gradient. So I would like to rotate it so that the blue is on the bottom, and I would like to decrease it so that it's pretty heavy, and I would like to put the center point just below our cloud. And I'm going to do that with this one as well. Just quickly make the blue go to the bottom, drag in the width, bring it down so the center point is just below, like that. And what I like to do then is come along the edge of my cloud here and actually cut out a segment, which is why I do it on its own layer. So I'm just going to lock these other two cloud layers, select this above cloud layer, and forgive me, I'm doing this with the mouse at the moment. I'm just going to come in with my pencil tool, and I'm just going to draw a section of the cloud over top, which will create this sort of separating line. Now, I will set that to smooth, because if I don't, it's going to look awful trying to do it with the mouse. Essentially, I'm just going to be cutting out a section from the top of this cloud, which allows me to select this fill on the top. I can then delete it, double click my line, hit delete again. And you'll notice if you zoom in a bit more, you'll see it clearer. You've now got this white line, this white bounce along the top of the cloud, which adds quite a nice bit of depth to our artwork. So I'll be doing the same thing here. And in fact, I will just quickly get my small graphics tablet. This is a Wacom Intuos Small. You know me that I use my Wacom Cintiq where I draw on the screen. But this one allows me to draw on a tablet directly, and will make this section at least a little bit easier. So I can draw out that top section there, delete the top section of this fill, double click to select the entire pencil line and just delete that. And again, going back to the mouse now, you can see that I've got these separate shapes here, which are now part of the same cloud layer. So I can select everything, just unlock it all, position it back, boom. And there we've used solid fills and gradient fills to create our nice clouds. Now this is on the sky layer. So what I am going to do is just drag out a rectangle with no fill, no stroke, sorry, which I can do by selecting the stroke over here. Go to the fill section of my color window and just choose the blue for the sky. And I'm just going to drag out a sky box behind it just so we can see the clouds a little bit easier. For the sun, that's just going to be a nice flat color for now because we're going to be coming back to the sun in a later episode and doing some shape morphing. So I'm just going to fill that in with the paint bucket tool like so. Same thing for the mountains. We're not going to go overboard here. What I'll probably do is choose a slightly lighter color for this center mountain. So to do that, I'm just going to select this inner section and choose this kind of light green. Select these two outer sections, choose the slightly darker green. And for the border between them, I don't know whether I'm just going to choose the same dark green. You could even go to one of our gradients here. But I quite like that look where we've got the distant mountains sort of overlapping these two front ones here, like so. So drop back to our main composition here. And let's do the same thing with the grass, but we'll add a gradient to the grass like we did with the clouds. So we'll select our bright green layer for that. All I'm going to do this time is Control C, add in a new layer, Control Shift V. Okay. I'm going to just shift that down just a little bit. Okay. And because it's on our own layer, we can kind of manipulate it however we want. So I'm going to move that over just a little. And then I'm going to give it my green gradient that I set up earlier. I'm going to go to my gradient transform tool. I'm going to decrease its width, rotate it so that the dark green is on the bottom, like so. And here is a good trick. You can then lock your second layer, lock your original layer, and on your gradient overlay layer, you can just select that content. Oh, excuse me. There we go. You can just select that content. And with your eraser tool, you can then just erase out certain sections. For example, if I zoom in a little bit, decrease the size of my brush, and I just come in and do a few little tufts. Yeah. Just all over the place, just a couple of grassy tufts, like so. Now, you don't want to do too many of these because we've got our looping section. So if you wanted them to loop perfectly, you would do this before we did the duplicate that we did in the last session. So in fact, what I will do is I'll just make sure, if I undo those, I will just make sure that where my marks are erased, they shouldn't loop. So I think I can just do that by making sure it starts and ends with nothing on screen. But you get the point there, okay? I'll come back to that bit later, perhaps. But you can see when we drop back out of this, we've now got these slightly lighter grass tufts. And when we start rocking them in like this, you can see how it's not going to loop. So that's why you should do that before you've duplicated your grass here, which is a mistake that I made. Okay, same thing goes for this section here. I've duplicated this grass already, so I can't really do anything different. But what I can do is select all of my grass tufts without selecting the black outline, copy those, paste them in place on top. On the layer underneath, I'm just going to select everything and just give it the bright green layer, okay, rather than the black outline. And in fact, why not do that for our grass here as well, so that it's less of a visual weight compared to our characters, then our characters will be the only things outlined. Let's do that in dark green, so we've got a nice border on it there. Back inside our grass tufts layer, I can go to the layer on top. I can now make that green. I'll add a new layer on top of it. Control Shift V. Add the gradient tool. Select my transform gradient tool, like so, and select each of these. So you can see you can come through and you can tweak them individually.
I quite like it just going from left to right in this instance though. So I think what I will do is come in here, select just these three, lock the other layers, and using my eraser, instead of the pencil tool this time, I'm just going to come in and just unpaint or erase, not unpaint, some of the edges here on my grass. You know, just adding a bit more detail to the tufts, making it look a little bit more interesting. And this is a great way to add highlights quickly. Okay. And once you've done that with 3 sections that you like, there's nothing stopping you just, if like me, you've already duplicated these, holding Alt-Shift and dragging them over to duplicate. And that way you'll get your perfect loop again. And you can see your grass tufts moving by. So the rest of these characters, because they're animated, there's going to be no gradients on them. They're just going to be plain flat colors. So I'll come through and do that in a quick time lapse, so you don't have to watch me do that. And then I'll quickly explain with a duplicate of our character here some of the effects, and then that'll be it for this episode. So stick with me and I'll see you in a second. Look everyone, it's a cameo from Phoebe. Say hello everyone. Hello Phoebe. Hello. Nah, she doesn't want to be up here. Okay, so here we have our fully colored animation, which is fantastic. So the next step is to just show you a couple of effects that you can apply to different movie clips, such as drop shadows and things like that. So let's just jump right into that final section of this tutorial. Okay, so first I'll show you all the effects you can apply to a single graphic. Now, as you can see here, we spoke about in our symbols episode, the difference between graphics and movie clips. And one of the differences is the color effects that you can apply. For example, if you select one of your graphics here, you can choose between 4 different color effects. Brightness is the first one, which just adds direct white or black value, which is great for making shadows. For example, if I duplicated this object here, turn the brightness all the way down to 0, and plonked another one on top, like so, you can get a duplicate, like hard shadow added to each of your frames, because it's just a duplicate of the graphic, which is really useful. Okay. Secondly, quite simply, you can add tint. Now, what tint does is essentially adds a large amount of white the more that you increase the tint, but you can also decrease the colors to change the color of the tint. So you can say, I want to add 50% white with pure white, or you can tint it with a different color. So if I were to reduce green to 0, we'd be tinting it with a direct purple, because we have a combination of red and blue together. Okay, so that's a 50% tint of purple. If you were to reduce red and green, it would be a 50% tint of blue, and so on and so forth. Okay, quite simple. The third effect that you can do with the graphic is advanced. And this is like a combination of the 4th effect and the tint effect. So you can decrease the color balance. So you can change the overall color balance of your graphic by changing the amounts of red, green, and blue that are involved in it. So for example, you could reduce all of the blue and just have full green and red in it, and it will give you a different tint. And then you can reduce the overall see-throughness of that graphic as well, which can be quite useful. And the final effect is just that, again, see-throughness, which they call alpha, which just shows how see-through something is. If I were to drag this one, for example, you can see that I can now half see through that same symbol. So 4 different color effects that you can apply there, which, as you can see, can be quite useful in certain circumstances, hopefully at least. So let's see what you can do with a movie clip as opposed to a graphic. So as you know, the first difference with a movie clip is that it will not play in your timeline. So we can't preview any of these, but what we can do is still create a number of duplicates of them and apply individual effects to each duplicate. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is select it, go over here, and you can see that under color effects, we have the same options: brightness, tint, advanced, and alpha. But we now have an additional menu called filters. Now under filters, you can add things that you might see in Illustrator or Photoshop. For example, a drop shadow will just add, like we did with the duplicate graphic before, a blurred or completely unblurred copy of your graphic symbol or movie clip symbol. You can adjust the distance and the amount of blur, as well as the color of the shadow entirely. So you could make it green, for example. I always leave it on quality high. You can also knock out the original, which gives you basically just the shadow, which can be quite useful. You can make it on an inner shadow, which kind of makes it like an inner glow. Maybe a particular light has hit a character and you can make it glow like that. And you can hide the original object as well. So that's drop shadow, could be quite useful. The next filter is blur, which just directly blurs as if your object is out of focus. Can be quite useful when you're doing camera depth and layer tracking and things like that, which we'll get to in a later tutorial. Very useful. Make a few more duplicates of our character here. The next one after blur is glow, and this creates kind of like a drop shadow, apart from it's like an outer glow around your entire object. You can make an inner glow around the entire object. So a drop shadow is directional, whereas the glow is universal. And again, you can do things like the knockout and stuff like that as well. Maybe if you made it the same pink, it would look quite good if you did knockout. Knockout is quite useful when you want to make like lightsaber style effects, basically, which is quite useful sometimes in certain situations. The next one after that, I'm just making sure I've got a clean copy, is bevel, and it kind of tries to make your object look a little bit 3D. So if we increase like that, you can see it kind of rounds off the edges of my characters a little bit. You can increase the distance, which makes it stronger or weaker, and can be actually quite nice in certain situations. It could be an outer, an inner, or a full bevel, which is both. Inner bevel is the most common one that you can see. And you can change the colors of your highlights as well if you wanted the dark and lighter colors to be within your color palette, for example. As you can see, it makes quite a nice effect for some things. Bevel is largely considered outdated, but for working in Adobe Animate and stuff like that, can actually look quite nice in certain circumstances. So after bevel, we have got gradient glow, which does a similar thing to normal glow, apart from you can apply a gradient to it. So in the same way you can edit other gradients, you can just adjust, for example, adding in different colors and things like that to a gradient. Basically a very complicated gradient glow around the edge. I've never used this one. I can't think of a situation where it could be useful, maybe for some special effects or something like that. But again, I probably would just take it into After Effects if I wanted to do effects that are that detailed. In addition to gradient glow, you've got gradient bevel, which is the exact same thing. I'm not really going to take you through it because it's the same thing. It just does a bevel. And apart from gradient bevel, you've got adjust color. And this is kind of like adjusting the overall colors of your entire graphic. So you can change the hue, for example, of the entire graphic, and all of its relative colors. Colors will remain relative to each other. Same thing with the saturation. It increases everything globally within inside that symbol. So that sort of thing. So you can see here, there's quite a few different effects that in certain situations can be quite useful. I do like drop shadow and I do like bevel. I can't say that I use the other ones too much, but they are quite useful to have there. So that was a bit of an oddball episode all over the place, but is what it is really when it comes down to it. The one thing you might want to use in an animation like this is the bevel to add some fake roundness to your characters, but I quite like the simple style, which is why I did it in a separate document over here for us in this particular instance. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. We're getting into the deep dive of Adobe Animate now, and the next few episodes I think are going to be quite cool, going into specific features. So hopefully you'll stick around for those, and I'll see you next time on another episode of TipTut. A very heartfelt thank you to my level 2 and above members: Ghosts, WN62, Anonymous, Mel M. Hoover, Maybe Sharma, Ralika M, Mun336, Ian Costello, Dushyant Singe, DaVinci Goel, and Lone Wolf number 16. Thank you so much, you guys, and I hope you have a lovely Christmas.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.
Let's explore the shape morphing options in Adobe Animate 2021.
TipTut.
Welcome back to Intro to Adobe Animate 2021. In this episode, we explore the options for shape morphing, whether that's done frame by frame or with tweening and shape hints. We'll break down all of the options, so let's just get right to it. Number 5, shape morphing. Shape morphing is the act of changing smoothly from one shape to another. This could be as simple as going from a circle to a square, all the way up to morphing from one entire object to another. In Adobe Animate, you can use shape tweening to achieve this automatically, but it only works well on simpler shapes. You can use shape hints, which tell the computer which parts of your shape are important. Alternatively, you can do it frame by frame, which is just a manual process that achieves the same results, but of course can be as complex as your skill allows. So let's jump right in and explore both options, then apply simple shape morph to our animation. Okay, so inside of Adobe Animate, there are two ways to create a shape morph. The first is using shape tweening and shape hints that we spoke about in the third episode of this series. And the other way is just to animate something frame by frame. So I'll take you through the shape tweening way first. If I were to draw, say, a circle, and later on in the timeline, I wanted to change that circle into a square, then using a standard shape tween will probably work totally fine. Just move this across the stage, right click, choose create shape tween. And as you can see, you get a fairly okay transition from one to the other. You might go to classic ease, ease in and out, and make it whip around a bit faster. And of course, you can always just delete, redraw the content, and see if that changes the effects. But you'll notice about halfway through, you get some kind of weird like line thickness change, especially if you're doing this with like a pen rather than using lines. You'll also notice on slightly more complicated shapes, like for example, this flame shape that morphs from one edge to the other, you might get some difficulties around the corners and tips. Now, it is quicker to shape tween and fix that on simpler shapes than it is to animate frame by frame. So I'll show you how. If you go to modify shape, add shape hint, it will add a sort of little red circle with the letter A in it. And if you press Ctrl-Shift-H as a shortcut, it will do the same thing. So you can see now that we have two red dots here labeled A and B. And on our next keyframe, we have the same two dots labeled A and B as well. Basically, you want to place these shape hints wherever your shape is messing up. And they work as kind of like pins that keep that element in place. So if I were to place a shape hint at the top and bottom of this stroke here where the corner is messing up, and then went over to my last keyframe and moved those shape hints into the same place, you'll notice they'll go green. There we go. You'll notice that once they go green and you scrub back through, it's fixed that shape hint for you. Now, sometimes they won't go green and it will still work, but most of the time they will go green. And it fixes it for you like so. And this should allow you to then carry on with your animation using those shape tweens. Now, I prefer the frame by frame method because you can get a lot more nuance and character to your animations. For example, you can add tweening and things like that, which will then morph your shapes, with a bit more nuance. But I prefer doing it frame by frame in certain circumstances because it gives you more control. Like for example, if I go inside my sun layer here on our animation, and we notice that we've got 36 frames to be working with. So I go to frame 36 and I can just hit F7 to add in a blank keyframe there. Okay. I would like my sun to go from a circle over here to a triangle over here. And then back again. Okay. So perhaps what we'll do if we want to go back again is we'll put this, what's half of 36? 18. Put this at frame 18. Drag our original circle over there to duplicate it. Now we could just right click these, choose create shape tween. And to be honest, it'll do a fairly okay job of morphing back and forth between the two. If we added some easing in and out as well, that'll probably look a little bit better. Okay. But to me, that's not really good enough. So on top of that, what I'm going to do is just copy and paste my original circle. In the middle, I'm going to draw my triangle. Like so. And I'm going to hide my original tweened layer. And we're going to do a shape tween in a frame by frame shape morph in between those two keyframes. Okay. So the reason I like to do it this way is because you get to use all of the stuff that makes animation good, like squash and stretch and overlap, anticipation, all that good stuff. For example, I would like in the absolute middle between these two frames, let's call that frame 9,
I'm going to stretch out my onion skin so I can see those 2 frames. And I want to really emphasize the squash and stretch here, as if it was warping completely. So for example, I might stretch the sun like a ball of putty into this big stretched blob halfway through. And then using my free transform tool, make sure the path between these points is perfectly lined up. Okay. Then halfway between those exact points, I might hit F7 again and have our sun shape here start to stretch out. So you can see how just doing it frame by frame, you get a lot more character and control between your 2 points. Here, for example, I'd want to morph from the circle through to the triangle. So I'd start to indicate those points while still keeping it relatively spherical. But of course, it's like the points of the triangle are starting to come out. And then, of course, it will end up in position here. So I'm going to remove the rest of these keyframes because we're just going to be duplicating them again in a minute. And this is the point at which we end up on frame 19 with our finished tween, okay? So for example, we now have frame 1, frame 5, frame 9. And then on frame 13, we have our next midpoint. And let's say frame 17, just to keep things perfectly even, we have our next midpoint, okay? So halfway in between each of those frames, we can add the rest of our tweens. For example, I can color my onion skin as well if I go to advanced settings and just make the next one green and the previous one red to make it a little bit easier to see what we're working with here. Okay. So at this point here, I'm going to come back in a moment and add our anticipations in. But at this point, we want it to be stretching somewhere between this first frame and this 5th frame. And then by this point here, we want it to be starting to be heavily loaded towards the front, but still most of its weight behind and most of its weight circular. At this point, which is between the complete midsection and where it starts to form up into a triangle, we basically want the rest of the weight to start moving over like so. And I'm doing this quite roughly, just so that this isn't a super long tutorial. Okay, and then by this point here, we want it to basically be its finished shape, but still squashing and stretching into position. So we'll just give it some extra frames there. So we can already see how this has a lot more character to it than our previous animation. And the good thing is you can come in and just edit to your heart's content. For example, I think this frame as well can go. It doesn't need to be that slow. Perhaps even do these frames on 1s here to make it even smoother. Like so. And then that way we could add in a settling frame here. Like this. Okay. So you can see how you get a little bit more character when you do things frame by frame than you would if you just use your shape tweens. Okay. And you might also add in some anticipation, which is our sun winding up to its movement by moving slightly back before it launches forwards. Like so. And you could even get away with just reusing the same shape and squash stretching it a little bit.
and then it's whipped across the sky like so. Now you'd have to, of course, duplicate and reverse these. Let's see if we can get away with just duplicating and reversing the frames, but we probably will have to redraw them because otherwise it won't look realistic enough. But let's turn on our loop and see what we've got to work with. And we can just extend that section out just a little bit. Okay. So you can see how you get the same effect. You've got a circle moving through to a triangle, but you can see how it's a lot more dynamic and unique motion when you animate things frame by frame, which is kind of all animation really. And you get a bit more nuance and a bit more control as well. So I definitely will be going through and redoing the stretch from this direction because I don't like the way that looks. So I'll do that quickly in time-lapse mode, and then we'll come back and we'll look at the finished thing. Okay, and there you have it, our shape-tweened shape using frame-by-frame animation. So obviously this is entirely subjective, but to me, this like squashed and stretched and morphed shape here that we use just by taking our circle, morphing to our triangle and thinking about how the points of that are going to connect. So for example, if this was our circle and a point would be here, here, and here, then obviously as it morphs, it would just become a rounded triangle all the way into a triangle. So you just think about where your points become curves and so on. The way that looks compared to the way this looks, to me, is incomparable. But of course, it is entirely up to you. It's whatever style you would like. So for example, I would just go and extend that to the full 36 frames. Or rather, sorry, I would do it at the start of the loop so that it works as intended, like so. So there's just a little bit of pause there between those elements. When we get back into our main timeline, we can see our sun will be looping perfectly in the background of the sky there. Just a little bit of fun animation for the background. So hopefully you've enjoyed this shape morphing tutorial and you found it a little bit useful. Consider what parts of your animation you could use shape morphing for. It's not just for background elements like this. It could be, his hair, his hat flapping around, depending on what style you've gone for. Anything like that, really. So next time we'll be looking at shape rigging, and we'll be using it to add a little waving cactus plant in our background. So stick around for that one, and I'll see you next time for another episode of TipTut. An absolutely massive thank you to my level 2 and above members, WN62, Anonymous, Mel M. Hoover, Maybe Sharma, Ralika M, Ian Costello, Dushyant Sinj, DaVinci Goel, Lone Wolf 16, and Starry Teachy. Thank you so much for being members, and if you'd like to join the TipTut Zone and become a Tip Titan yourself, you can join by clicking that button below.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.
Let's explore the options for rigging in Adobe Animate.
TipTut.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Intro to Adobe Animate 2021. In this episode we take a look at rigging. Now I've already made 2 detailed videos on both types of rigging that I use in Animate, so this video is really going to only explain what rigging is and how I use them for this animation particularly. Part 6, Shape Rigging. So if you'd like to learn how to rig using the bone tool, head on over to this video by clicking in the link in the top right, and if you'd like to rig using layer properties, head on over to this video instead. So with that in mind, let's take a quick look at both options and then use layer parenting to add some simple shape rigging to our scene. Rigging is the act of applying a skeleton-like structure to an object and using that structure to control the connected object. This makes animating arguably easier and quicker. You can rig using the bone tool, which builds an actual skeleton rig for your object or character, or you can rig using layer parenting, which ties layers to other layers so that they follow them around. In this episode, we'll be using layer parenting to quickly and subtly animate a cactus in the background of our animation. So let's jump right into the software and get right to it.
Okay, so here we are inside Adobe Animate, and as discussed, we're going to add a cactus to our scene in the background and use layer parenting to rig it and just animate it swaying slightly as it moves by. So to do that, we're just going to pop a new layer above our floor here, and we'll rename this one Cactus because labeling your layers is always a good idea. And then from that point, we'll just zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to grab my color palette by opening up my swatches window here. Like so. And I'm going to grab, let's grab this nice light green color. And for the time being, I'm just going to draw the main chunk of the cactus. Maybe something like this. Okay. Let's select that with V, hit F8 to turn it into a symbol, which we'll rename Cactus M for main and make sure it's a graphic. Then we can go inside this and continue editing so that we can isolate the rest of our cactus. Okay, so we have our main cactus selection. We'll rename this Cactus M and we'll hit F8 again. And now that I'm inside the cactus, I'm just going to call it CM for cactus main. Okay. On top of that, we'll have a new layer called cactus left and another bit called cactus right. And then on each of these layers, we're just going to draw the extra little bits that come off the sides of a normal cartoon cactus. And making sure that we're drawing each of these portions on their own layers. Okay, and maybe what I'll do is offset this one so it's a little bit higher up. And we're just going to make sure that these overlap a little bit as well, because we're going to come to color these in a moment. So I'm going to fill all of these in, actually, thinking about it, including this main section here, like so. Okay, so now we have a cactus on various different levels and layers. Now I'm going to turn each of these bits into a symbol. I accidentally just broke apart that main cactus section because I'm a damn fool. So we'll pop that back in from our library, just drag it back out and fill it in like so. So now we have 3 layers with 3 symbols, each one a different part of the cactus. Okay, so we'll go inside one of our cactus right layers here. Go to our swatches. I think I want a gradient overall. And we've got our gradient control or gradient transform tool that we learned about in the previous lesson. And I'm just going to drag it out so that it goes from light to dark. Okay. And we'll do that as well on cactus left, just to add a bit of variation to our colors. So we'll grab the gradient. We'll go to our gradient transform tool. Drag it out so that the point where it connects the main cactus of the body, it's still seamless, okay? And inside here, we'll do the same thing. But of course, we'll edit this gradient so that it blends seamlessly, or near enough seamlessly, into the arms of the cactus, okay? So it looks pretty good. Let's stick with that, I think. I'll go back to my free transform tool. And we'll just move the anchor points of each cactus section so that they rotate from the correct place. And the last thing to do is just go back inside. I like to add a new layer on top. Grab my light green color here. And I'm just going to go around the edges to add in our highlights. And also just flick upwards a few times to add in a few spines on our cactus. Okay, and we'll do the same thing here on this side. Oops, again, should be on a layer above. Just to keep things nice and editable should we want to come back later on. So you can see we've quite quickly built up a decent looking cactus, which we can use and apply some basic shape rigging to get this to sway nicely in the wind. If you wanted to, you could select your gradient and draw in some little gradient, darker gradient spines. What is that one messing up? Like so. Okay. On the lower half of your cactus. And boom. Inside cactus, we've now got a ready to go drawing. Okay. So 3 layers with 3 transform tools positioned into the correct places, which allow us to rotate our cactus. But as you'll notice, if we rotate the main section here, the arms currently don't follow it, and we want these arms to be attached. So we can do that with layer parenting. So I'm going to turn on the layer parenting options here, like so, which is going to open up an extra little panel. And we want to basically choose which objects are going to follow which sections of the cactus. For example, this is quite a simple rig because the right-hand side and the left-hand side of the cactus are going to both follow the main portion. So we can just drag from the left cactus section to the main section and from the right cactus section to the main section, and it will create this little tree for us here. Now, if you want something a bit more involved, then you should go to the simple character rig video that I linked at the beginning of this one, and it actually involves rigging a few more things in this. But basically for now, what this means is when I rotate the body of my cactus, everything moves with it, but I can still individually rotate the arms of my cactus to my heart's content. Okay, so all we're going to do now is go and do probably a 1 second loop. So add in some keyframes there, adding some keyframes halfway. And we'll have the cactus, I've got several things selected there. That's why that grouping didn't work. But select the cactus, just rotate it to the right a little bit. Go to this last keyframe here, rotate it to the right a little bit. So the other one was left. Sorry, got my left and right's mixed up there. And we know that our animation is 40 frames long, or roughly 40 frames long. So if we copy those first frames back, we've now got a cactus that goes left, right, and back to the middle. So when this goes to the left, we'd want to compensate by rotating these limbs slightly this way. When it goes to the right, we want to compensate by rotating these limbs slightly back, like so. And then by the time it goes back to the middle, it gets back to the beginning. Select all of these, right-click them, create classic tween. I'm going to go to my classic ease window now, go to ease in and out quad, just to give it a little bit of easing. And we've got a nice waving cactus in the background. If you'd like, you can do some secondary animation. So have your limbs be dragged behind your cactus. And you can do that by just taking these and moving them over a few frames, which means they start a little bit later. Obviously, if you hold Alt and drag back, you'll get them kept in the same place, which is obviously quite useful. Just remove that classic tween. So now you've got them being dragged behind a little bit. And of course, you can then just reposition those keyframes as well. So it looks like it's being dragged by the rest of the cactus. So if we go back to our main scene, we can now see that looping. But we obviously need to attach it. So what we could do is we could take the cactus where we want it to be here, and you could layer parent it to the floor, which means it would move along with the floor. But because we want this to be seamlessly looping, if we did that, we'd want to go and make sure that the cactus starts off screen like so. Okay. And then that way it'll move at a little bit of a different speed as well from the previous layer, because we've repositioned it to animate further. So if you don't want to do it that way, you can obviously just remove the layer parent and do a same classic tween as we've done here with the rest of our elements. But since we've already animated it once, we want to reduce the amount of keyframes that we use wherever we can in our animation. So layer parenting means we don't have to add any more keyframes, which is great. Okay. And if you want it to be a bit further away, you can just continue tweaking it. And as long as it ends off screen, shouldn't matter too much. Okay. And that's really all there is to it. Nice, quick and easy one. Like I said, if you want a more detailed character rigging thing, it is a whole thing unto itself. So I've done unique videos on these already, which you can check out by clicking the links in the description or on the tags, which are in this video. Otherwise, we've added just another little level layer of animation to our scene here. And I think it just adds a little bit extra, just being able to have that slight wave of the cactus as it swings by. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. We are coming up to the end now. I believe next is working with sound, then cameras, and then exporting. So well done if you've made it this far. And I will see you in the next episode. A colossal thank you to my level 2 and above members: Win62, Anonymous, Mel M. Hoover, Maybe Sharma, Ralaka M, Ian Costello, Dushyant Singe, Lone Wolf 16, Starry Teachy, and Katmar. You guys are lovely, and I hope you have a great new year. If you'd like to become a member of the TipTut Zone, you can click the join button below for exclusive discounts, access to the Discord, shoutouts, perks, and other things that are really cool.
Subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.
Let's explore the sound workflow, or lack thereof, in Adobe Animate.
TipTut.
Hello everybody and welcome back to TipTut and to Intro to Adobe Animate 2021. In this episode we talk about working with sound and whether you should really in Adobe Animate. The sound options for Animate are fairly limited as it's intended for a trigger-based sound system for things like flash games and web adverts. Working with sound in the timeline is simple enough but can quickly become unwieldy, so here's what I recommend. If you're working with a lip sync or want to add simple sound effects to your animation, then Adobe Animate is perfect for that. That's what it's designed for. But I would recommend using something like Premiere Pro, a video and audio editing software, if you want complex audio. For example, in this project I made previously, I did the lip sync audio in Adobe Animate, then did the rest of the audio editing in Premiere Pro. As you can see, it gets pretty complicated and you have much more powerful audio editing tools in Premiere when compared to Animate. With that in mind, let's explore the audio options you do have in Animate by adding some simple sound effects to our scene. Number 7, working with sound. Okay, so here we are inside Adobe Animate and we're going to try and add some sound, specifically some grunts, as our character hits the floor or twice each loop, which should be quite easy. So a few things to set up before we start adding sounds. I like to put all of my sounds on their own layer. Basically the way it works is wherever you place a keyframe, you can add a sound at that. Oh, my light just went out. It still looks okay. That's fine. You can place a keyframe at that location and add a sound to it. And the sound will continue to play until it finishes, essentially. So, for example, I could find the point where my character impacts, which just happens to be the correct frame there, and find the next point where he impacts again, like so. And I'd place my two sounds upon those two keyframe points. If I go to my library, I can import my sounds by just going to the folder where I've kept them. And I have 4 various types of grunts here. .wavs or .mp3s will work fine. And I'll just drag them into my library and I can play them. Or. And as you can see, we have our 4 different grunts there, which is quite useful. So I'm just going to pick one of my grunts and clicking on the keyframe, just going to drag it into my stage. Let's choose grunt 1. And you'll notice that you can see the waveform of that sound as it plays. Now, if when you hit enter and it plays and it doesn't make a sound, that's because your properties of your sounds aren't correct. If you go to your properties panel with the keyframe selected, you'll see it has sound here. You can also swap out for any of the other sounds that you want. So if I change it to grunt 3, you'll see it have a different, a different audio file in there now. And I can just position up, because obviously there's a little bit of a delay in our audio. If you can't see that, it's because your event isn't set to stream. Your sync needs to be on stream, because event, start and stop are all for when we're making interactive flash content, which we're not doing here. We're just making animation. So it has to be set to stream. Repeat will be set to none. And there's all sorts of effects you can do. Like, for example, forcing it to go to the left or right channel, having it fade from the left to the right. So it'll go like from the left ear to the right ear and back again. As our character's staying in the middle of the screen, obviously it needed to be none, but you can also set it to fade in or fade out if you've got a longer audio clip. Now, this is pretty much the full extent of audio control that you get in Adobe Animate, so it's not super powerful, which is why I recommend, if you're doing lots of audio, to do it outside of the system. And let's just watch by hitting Control Enter. Okay, so would I actually include these? Probably not, but we're doing a tutorial on them. Last few things to check is to go to File and Publish Settings. And make sure that your audio stream is set to a high quality. Now, by default, these days, it is set to MP3 150 kilobytes per second, which is fine. If yours is sounding compressed, however, you can select this here and just choose RAW. And that means that whatever audio quality goes in will be the audio quality that you get out. Hit OK, and it will change over. And you'd want that to do it just for both audio streams and audio events as well. What Stream also does is that if you are playing a large Swift file, and it lagged a little bit, it would lag the audio too. Whereas if it was set to an event, it wouldn't actually lag the audio. Some hang-ups from old Flash days. So that's pretty much all there is actually to it. You can add audio onto your own layers. You can scrub through
which is how you do lip sync. And if you're interested in doing lip sync, then I do have a tutorial on lip syncing, which I will link to with a card in the top right corner now. But we don't obviously have any lip sync for this animation. So thank you very much for watching. Very quick one this time around. And hopefully I'll see you next time for, I think, camera options. And then after that is the last episode, which is learning how to export everything that we've made. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on TipTut. An absolutely massive thank you to my level 2 and above members: WN62, Anonymous, Mel M. Hoover, Maybe Sharma, Ralaga M, Ian Costello, Deshant Singe, Lone Wolf 16, Starry Teachy, Katmar, and JK Digital Creations. You guys are super duper awesome, lovely people, and I love you. Everybody else, I love you too. But if you become a member of the TipTut Zone, you not only get access to exclusive perks, shoutouts, and design feedback, but you also become a Tip Titan and get to use that dope-ass emoji on live streams and in comments. So do it, okay? You become a Tip Titan. It's awesome. I love you. Bye.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.
What is parallaxing and how do we use the camera in Adobe Animate? Let's find out.
TipTut.
Hello everybody and welcome back to TipTut and to Intro to Adobe Animate 2021. In this episode, we'll work with our camera to add a simple parallax to our scene using Animate's inbuilt layer depth. Now, I will say that I've already made a complete and comprehensive episode on just using the camera that I'm very, very proud of. So if you've got 10 minutes, I'd go and watch that episode first, as it covers literally everything you need to know about the camera. In this episode, we'll just quickly explore what you need to know as a beginner. So let's get right to it. Number 8, camera and parallaxing. The camera is a separate object in Adobe Animate, and you can set a layer depth which determines how far away each layer is from the virtual camera. When you move the camera, the layers respond accordingly, and the effect of these layers moving in perspective is known as parallaxing. Disney perfected the physical parallax camera back in the 1930s, but nowadays it's all done digitally. Let's jump into our scene and add some simple zoom in out camera movement. Okay, so let's take a look at adding a camera and some layer depth to our scene. Now, adding a camera is very simple. You just press the C button on the keyboard and it will create a new camera layer for you here. It gives you this camera control panel when you've got your camera layer selected. And using this, you can drag in or out to zoom. And you'll notice that it zooms everything that's on your stage. You can release and drag again if you reach the end of this bar as well to keep continuing and going further and further. If you switch to rotate mode, you can also do the same by rotating something on your stage. Now, every layer that is not unlocked from the camera, so every layer that is locked to the camera will ignore this. And you can lock a layer to the camera by clicking this icon here, which will attach or detach all of them, which means that if you drag this, nothing happens. If you want to do that for individual layers, you obviously just click individual layers and it will unlock them so that they do not react to the camera. Okay, could be quite useful if you wanted something to be attached to the camera. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is set up the layer depth so that as we zoom in, it doesn't all move at the same level or the same speed. We want it to react to the camera as if it wasn't just on a flat plane. Okay. So the way we do that is by setting up layer depth. Now, I do recommend you set up your layer depth before you do any animation, because as you can see here, when I start doing this, you have to set it up for each keyframe, which can be a right pain in the butt if you've got a lot of keyframes. So if you don't have this panel, you just need to go to Window and then layer depth, and it will open up this panel for you. And this triangle here represents the camera with the large side of the triangle representing your canvas, okay? And as you can see on each of our layers here, we'll need to rename this one sound. On each of the layers here, we have a number next to them. If I were to push this number, for example, this grass, closer to the camera, you'd see that green line moving correspondingly, and further away from the camera, again, moving correspondingly. Now, we've already drawn all of our content, so you'll notice it scales up and down as you do this. If you don't want it to scale up and down, you can just click Maintain Size and then type in or drag a number here. I'm just going to put this one to -300, which puts it closer to the camera. You'll see it's moved much closer, but it's maintained the correct size. Now, we've done that on the grass layer here, but if I actually go to my next keyframe, it's put it back to 0, so I have to put Maintain Size, -300 again. And the idea is anything that's closer to the camera, really close, you want to be past this line. Anything that's further away, you want to be past the other line here. So I'm going to leave my bouncing character at 0 because that's the focus point. And everything else we're going to push just in various increments behind it.
So this man, for example, I would maintain size because I've already set him to the size I want to be. And let's just stick him at 200. You'll notice there his feet popped behind the grass because the grass, or the ground at least, is at 0. So we'll be fixing that, don't worry. Now, this guy's got quite a few keyframes, so we'll just go through and do that to all of them. And I'll be fast forwarding through all of these. Sorry, he just disappeared behind the mountain there, but it's because I haven't done the mountain yet. I'll be fast forwarding through all of this because it's just a case of picking a number and seeing if you like it, which is why it's good to do this without any keyframes in place. So I'm just going to go through and add the rest of these layers. For example, the cactus I'd probably put at 300, the floor at 400, and then the mountains and clouds way back in the distance because you don't really want them to move. So I'll just nip through and do that now. Okay, so I've pushed all of these layers back now, and as you can see from the numbers here, I've just pushed them further and further back, the more further they would back actually be in real life. Wow, was that a sentence? I pushed them further back, the more further back they would be in real life, is what I meant to say. So my grass, very close, my bounce layer on 0, my man just behind that, my cactus just behind the man, my floor very close but behind the cactus, mountains, about 1,000 in the distance, clouds 2,000, sun 2,500, and the sky 5,000. What this means is when I come to my camera layer now and open up my camera tool with C, for example, if I were to move everything around like this, you can see that my grass here moves much faster in position than my sky or my sun or my clouds because they're way, way, way behind the camera in the layer depth. Okay, so what I could do is put a keyframe here and here, for example, pop a keyframe in the middle. So we're at frame 36. So let's make it frame 19. Add a keyframe to my camera, press my C tool to bring my camera up, maybe zoom in a little bit and pan down as if we're moving closer to the ground. Something like that. Now, whether or not I'll keep this, don't know. It's just to show you. If I right-click those, just use Classic Tween, that'll animate the camera in the same way that you animate another keyframe. Let's go to Classic Ease. And on this first one here, let's have it ease out. So it goes fast to slow. Cubic or quad. And let's do the same thing here, but easing in like so. So we'll get a nice bouncing effect like so. So let's test our movie with Control Enter. Wait for it to export the SWF. And as you can see now, we have our camera moving. I'll just stop that because it's going to go over and over. We have our camera moving in and out, and with the rest of our objects in accordance to it. Now, would you really use it for a scene like this? I don't know. Probably not. But it helps to explain what we use it for. Go check out the full camera tutorial if you want it. I kind of rushed it here a little bit just to give you guys a brief overview of what you can do with the camera. If you want a full detailed one, just go to the camera tutorial. Well, that's it for now. Next time, we're going to be taking a look at actually exporting this animation finally, and I'll show you all the different ways that you can do that and the reasons that you might want to choose those different ways. So stick around. You've done really well to get so far. Hopefully you've made something that you're proud of, and I'll see you next time on another episode of TipTut. Massive thank yous to my delightful and lovely level 2 members: WN62, Anonymous, Mel M. Hoover, Maybe Sharma, Ralika M, Ian Costello, Dushant Singe, Lone Wolf 16, Starry Teachy, Katmar, and JK Digital Creations. You guys are super lovely. If you would like to become a member of the TipTut Zone and become a Tip Titan yourself, just click that join button below.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.
It's finally time to export our animation, so let's learn how actually to do that properly.
TipTut.
Hello everybody and welcome back to TipTut and to Intro to Adobe Animate 2021. In this episode, we're finally ready to export our animation, and there's a few options on how to do that, depending on where and how you want to use it. So no theory this time, let's just jump right into the how. Number 9, exporting and publishing options. Okay, so here we are. We have finished our animation and we are ready to export it. Now, we've got here our sort of bouncing in and out camera motion. We've added our sound. I've just muted it for now because obviously you don't want to hear for the next 5 minutes while I'm chatting. We've added color, we've done our shapes, done tweening, we've done frame by frame. We're finished. We've just got to actually export the damn thing. Now, 2021 has added some new features for quick export, which I'll show you first, and then we'll go through the full exporting options. So first step when it comes to exporting is to make sure that you have saved your project, okay? Once your project is saved and it is safe, for some reason it is stuck on 25%, so let's just wait for that. Okay, wow, that took a long time, not sure why. Once it is saved, you can get ready for a quick export. Now, up in your top right-hand side of your interface, you've got here the quick share and publish. So if you click that, you've got social share and you've got publish. If you choose publish, you can choose between a video or an animated GIF. I'll just click video, hit publish. It will get the video ready for export, and then open up Adobe Media Encoder for you. Pop that file in Adobe Media Encoder and export it and tell you that it's done. You can then click the file and it'll open it up in Windows Explorer, and you can check out the file and see your exported animation, which is pretty cool, okay? Really nice, quick export, which is great. GIF works in the same way. It just gives you a GIF instead of a video. Share on social currently supports Twitter and YouTube. If you click YouTube, it will literally just make a video and upload it for you, so I never do that. But you could pop it up on Twitter if you wanted to, sign into your Twitter account, give it a description and some hashtags and things like that. Hit share and it shares it. Really simple. I'm not going to do it because this one isn't finished and I don't want it on my Twitter feed. Okay. Now, social share, easy peasy, but we want proper export options where we get control over what we export. Now, there are several ways that you would usually export, but I'll just talk about publishing first. If you go to your publish settings, you'll notice there's a few options here that you probably want to check. You're always going to have a SWF export. That's just a standard Flash export. You can export all these other types of options as well whenever you do publish, but these advanced options are probably the most important. We talked about our audio last time, but do you want to compress your movie? That's usually checked. I've never really noticed the difference between compressed and uncompressed. Include hidden layers is probably the most important one. For this one, we do not want to include hidden layers because we have our sketches on hidden layers and things like that. And if you want to take something into After Effects, you're better off checking the Optimize for After Effects button. Then when you hit OK, you can go to File, Publish, and it will create all of that publish stuff for you. And basically, it's just a finished and complete way of doing the same thing when you press Control Enter and test your film, apart from it gives you all the supporting stuff as well. If you want to export as a MP4 or as an image sequence, you just go to File, Export. Export an image will just export the current frame that you're on, which is kind of useless unless you're making a thumbnail or something. Export movie is what will give you your PNG sequence. Okay, so you can see here from a previous animation, I exported a PNG sequence. This is quite useful because if your export is very long and it crashes overnight or something, you'll still have, everything up until the point where it crashes will be totally fine because it'll be individual PNGs. Whereas if you did it as a video and it crashed, you'd lose everything. So you'd hit save and it would just export as a series of PNGs there. Okay. You then bring those PNG sequences into Premiere Pro or After Effects and compile them, and it will create your footage for you. The most export animated GIF has kind of been overtaken by the quick share publish, so we won't go over that. Export scene as asset will export your entire document as an asset that you can load in the assets panel. You'll find it under all objects, and it's like bringing a rig or bringing a symbol from another project into this project. But you can see here I have a scene from another animation that I've exported as an asset. I can drag this entire scene into my document and it will bring it out for you. For example, if I say insert timeline scene and I drag out this here, it might take a second before it drops, but it will drag out every frame, symbol, piece of animation, whatever that we have from that other project into this one, which can be quite powerful. Do we want that? No. I now want to delete this scene as well because when I go to export it, it will export this scene. So I'll just hit delete. Okay. What I want is file export video/media. And that's going to export this for us. It will open up a window. I'm just going to cancel and just stop this from playing so it doesn't loop forever. File export video/media. This is the one you'll use probably most of the time. It will allow you to change your render size. So you can double the size to say 4K if you wanted to. You can export the entire movie or individual scenes. So I could have just exported that one scene, but I like to export the entire movie.
If you do an individual scene, you can choose the frame range or you can choose the time range to export, but we're going to export the entire movie. H.264 or H.265 are the best formats for the internet, so we'll leave it on H.264. And you can do default AME, which is Adobe Media Encoder. It will just do a default H.264 export. You choose your output path. In this case, I want it to just go into Intro to Adobe Animate 2021 and then into this folder here. And we can just hit export with this checked, and it will again open up Media Encoder for you, which I can tab to now. Add your file, automatically export it, and then you can click your file to open it up, and you'll have your file exported. Okay. Now, the only other thing you might want to do is take it into After Effects, add some textures or something like that to it, but that's a different story, a different subject. We have now pretty much covered publishing your file. So well done. Very massive congratulations. You have made it to the end of Intro to Adobe Animate 2021, and you have an animation which you have made from scratch by yourself from start to finish. You should be very, very proud. Check out some of my other videos on my more advanced tutorial series about Animate or motion graphics or whatever it is you want. Leave a comment saying what you liked or didn't like about this series so that I can improve when I make the next one. And hopefully I'll see you next time for another episode of TipTut. If you found this useful, please stick around and you'll hear a little bit about membership to the TipTut Zone, which hopefully you'll consider and help keep the channel strong and supported throughout the future. Cheers everyone, and I'll see you next time. Absolutely colossal and massive thank you to my level 2 members, WN62, Anonymous, Mel M. Hoover, Maybe Sharma, Ralika M, Ian Costello, Dushant Singe, Lone Wolf 16, Starry Tichi, Katmar, and JK Digital Creations. Your kindness cannot be overstated, and I am forever grateful. Thank you so much. If you'd like to become a member of the TipTut Zone, become a TipTutan yourself for exclusive perks, just click that join button below.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.